A terrifying flame pierced the small mansion, enveloping everything around it in ashy smoke. At that moment, the princess was preparing food, or rather, vegetable soup. The knights rushed downstairs to the kitchen, trying to save the unsuspecting girl. As soon as the blonde tried to taste her creation, already bringing a spoon full of delicious food, the door opened, and a sonorous and brave voice began to call out for the princess. The lady turned around, a plate in her hands, to look at the new people in her kitchen, and she gave them an inquisitive look, signaling a lack of understanding of what was happening. The hostess of this kitchen confirmed she was a princess, but asked them to wait a minute because she hadn't finished eating her preparations. The man asked again to confirm if he really saw the sixth princess of Rouen in front of him. When the blonde finished eating and confirmed the knight's arguments, he ordered to seize her immediately. The subordinates grabbed the girl by the arms, forcing her to drop a plate with a small remnant of vegetable soup and pieces of boiled dough directly onto the floor, not allowing her to finish her meal. They began to lead the princess away, but she shouted to the knights to at least let her finish one spoonful of her dish. The rainy weather did not stop all the commoners from standing in front of the knight. And adoring him, the blonde began to make her way through the crowd to sit next to the royal family. One of them began to whisper to the sixth princess that this place was for members of the royal family, and that the slightest mistake could cost them their lives, so she suggested sitting somewhere else. But the blonde hastened to say that she was also a member of the royal family, and she had the right to sit next to the others. The lady, whose hair looked like flames and whose eyes were green apples, laughed because she remembered that there were rumors that a child lived in an abandoned palace. Everyone began to discuss this incident, but in the opinion of the princess herself, they could laugh as much as they wanted. She didn't care, because otherwise, everyone here would be beheaded. She said this because she knew the fate of the kingdom, as she was reborn with memories of a past life where the girl read a popular fantasy novel before dying. The main character of this story was the beautiful Princess Ingrid, and the hero was a mad emperor who dreams of conquering the continent. The hero asks Ingrid to come to the imperial palace, but the girl coldly refuses, and then the offended ruler orders the duke to seize the kingdom. This turns into a real drama for the second male lead, who falls in love with the princess, his master's wife, a princess who wasn't even introduced in the novel. The heroine was reborn as Luana, a girl born from the relationship between a maid and a king, since she still wouldn't have been able to avoid a life sentence in an abandoned palace. She decided to enjoy every minute she lived, gifted by God, and until her last breath, she will eat what she wants and when she wants. The heroine believed that the ideal thing would be to eat a lot before her cruel death, and the blonde was very disappointed that she couldn't finish her traditional Korean dish, for immediately they grabbed her and took her to her death. The threatening man asked if they had brought the entire royal family, but the lady only noticed that his suit was the color of sweet chocolate. And bitter, the fragile body of the red-haired beast sitting next to the princess was trembling, because she didn't want to die, and she whispered quietly about it. The man in the chocolate suit had a nickname, the Emperor's Dog, although it looked more like an insult. One of the royal family members loudly asked what they were going to do with them, to which he asked what, in their opinion, was happening to the ruling family of the captured kingdom. Suddenly, the king and father of this whole family began to scream in horror that they should save themselves, because he could give them anything. The sixth princess laughed because she didn't understand what the king was going to give her when the kingdom fell. But suddenly, she noticed that her master's main dog was coming towards her and was very surprised. Because why did this need her? Liana's older sister began to defend the girl, shouting that she was also a member of the royal family and that he should leave her alone immediately, although the girl herself understood that, despite being grateful to her sister. I don't even know her name, and she already stood up. The man quietly asked if anyone really cared what would happen to this woman, to which the intercessor replied that she was still a child and that he could take her instead of the girl. The reborn observed this same scene, the moment when interest in Ingrid arose in the Duke's soul. In other words, the heartbreaking love of the second male character starts right here. The lady showed 2 thumbs up, surprising the man with an otherworldly gesture. When asked what it meant, she said it meant the Duke was magnificent. He asked to see her hands to make sure the blonde hadn't done anything dangerous. She realized she couldn't explain anything as it was, so she started lying that a mosquito had bitten her. And she wanted to scratch her hand because it was itching a lot, but the Duke didn't understand a word. and he ordered the lady to be searched. The knights started searching and touching her, to which the girl only felt a tickling sensation, which made her start to laugh. One of them suddenly announced that he had found something and pulled a sausage stick out of the princess's pockets. The security immediately tied up the blonde, thinking it was a weapon or poison. In an instant, she was released, and the duke himself began to draw his sword, saying that if the sixth princess told the truth, she would die quickly and painlessly, which happened, as expected in any case, no matter how events unfold. The heroine will die. The only question was whether she would die long and painfully or quickly and easily. The blonde hair moved down instead of over the girl's head, and the answer that it was dried meat came out of her mouth. Furthermore, she didn't understand anything from the princess's murmurs, so the lady shouted loudly, frightening everyone present, that this was cheese jerky. She smiled awkwardly and confirmed that she herself had prepared that meat. The intercessor again began to shout that this girl was not smart enough. So she was abandoned. She was a good girl anyway. The princess handed a piece to the duke and decided that if he liked the meat, everything would be fine. But everyone started shouting that it might contain poison. The brunette only took a piece and began to savor the delicious meat, while the lady naively thought she could resolve the situation. They didn't even explain anything to the lady, but simply put her in prison. She couldn't understand because she couldn't get over that it wasn't tasty, because the meat with the cheese combination was simply wonderful. Seeing a man who was also present at the execution of the royal family, the blonde suddenly started calling him to ask him questions that interested her. The princess asked if the stranger knew what happened to the remaining meat after she was locked in the dungeon, to which he was surprised that the girl was in a situation and was thinking about such nonsense. He said, as the prisoner asked, that the remnants of the dish were destroyed by order of the duke. My hands felt a strong tremor from misunderstanding and anger, because now they had lost sight of her. In any case, Luana's role ended with the fall of the kingdom. Of course, the princess expected to die, and that would be the end. But think, they caught her over a piece of meat with cheese. The girl realized that the duke was angry, but the question was whether he would keep his promise to kill her quickly, or if he would suddenly want to punish her because the taste was simply terrible. Or maybe he just wanted to lock her up here, waiting for her to die soon. The princess spent her whole life in an abandoned palace, and now she will die quickly. But in captivity, that is not a given. Suddenly, a familiar silhouette appeared near the dungeon, and from his lips came phrases that the girl was a witch. The girl looked innocently at the duke, with crystal tears on her eyelashes, and he just asked her to stop pretending. But the objective of the fear towards her was that the duke tasted the girl's food, because of the witch's curse that had been passed down for generations in his family. The duke felt nothing but a disgusting aftertaste. The princess suddenly stood up abruptly and began to ask if the man had really locked her here because it wasn't tasty. But the man replied that everything was most likely edible. The duke took out a box and opened it. Inside, there was a bunch of tools. He said he lost the gift of taste due to a witch's curse, but the fact that he can taste the cooked meat probably means the princess is a witch. At first, the lady had no idea what he was saying, but suddenly she remembered that it was written in the novel itself. The thing is that Duke Legion was cursed by a witch. He also lost his sense of taste and felt any food as something disgusting. The witches disappeared, but the duke kept looking for a way to lift this terrible curse. His hatred for food and this curse was too difficult to express in words. But the character was a simple extra. She is the princess of a fallen kingdom. Now they say she is also a witch. The blonde tried to justify herself and prove that she was not a witch at all. But the man looked at her with eyes red with rage and told her that he would tell her the whole truth soon. The princess had simply planned to enjoy her food and die in peace all these years. But torture was not in her plans. This had to be avoided somehow, so the girl immediately fell to her knees. The blue-eyed girl suddenly abruptly admitted that she was a witch, hoping for her salvation. She said she was just learning to cast a spell and didn't know how to cast curses at all. The blonde rolled up the sleeve of her blue dress and revealed the mark that meant she was a witch, although, in reality, it was just a burn received while cooking. The duke asked her if she used witchcraft to make Sina, to which he received an affirmative answer. But in reality, she doesn't need witchcraft. The girl uses beef raised on the clean meadows and fresh air of the kingdom. She also added that she was using a secret ingredient, to which the duke thought she had added beetles. For according to legend, witches use them for potions. This was a lie, But in any case, the princess claimed to be telling the absolute truth. She smiled naively and looked at the man, hinting that she should not be tortured. But the man perfectly understood that the jerky made by this girl gave him for a moment a wonderful opportunity to taste it. It was very tasty, but since Luana said she was still learning to be a witch, then you shouldn't torture her, but just lock her up for a while. But still, the girl got out of prison, and she was very happy, looking out the window, because she thought she would never see that beautiful sky again, that she had enjoyed all the years of that carefree life. The Duke's assistant, the one who imprisoned the princess, asked her when she would start cooking, to which the lady replied, wiping the tears from her eyes, that she was ready to start right now. It was true that this man still had doubts about her cooking. In one case or another, her life depends on these dishes that the blonde must prepare with her own hands. While still in prison, the Duke announced that starting tomorrow morning, as soon as the sun rises, this girl will have to start cooking, and if he likes her dish, he will save her useless life. When the lady began to wash the vegetables to start preparing her favorite dishes to please the superior man, a red knight watched her closely. The ingredients are of the highest quality, which Luana could not even dream of while living in an abandoned palace. Since coming to this world, she had never seen such beautiful ingredients, but with such products. Even if this dinner is the last, it will be the best the princess will cook. The lady began to prepare a dish that would help her save her life. But in reality, she was a little alarmed by the fact that she was always being watched. The man, looking closely at the young witch, thought she was using very expensive ingredients. Finally, a couple of hours passed, and the girl cheerfully announced that everything was ready. This dish cannot be left to cool before eating. In this case, the Duke's assistant opened the door and asked her to follow him. The princess put her dish on the cart and took it towards the Duke's office. She just thought there was something so delicious in front of her, but unfortunately, she was forbidden to eat it. When the doors opened, the man sat down at the table and waited languidly. The princess decided there was nothing to worry about, because her cooking had no competition. There was no chance that the ruler wouldn't like it, but he just asked what kind of dish it was. The girl began to tell the story, describing that this was her favorite food from her past life. But the lady couldn't say this correctly, so she claimed that she invented this dish herself. The Duke just smiled, saying that this blonde was brave. Her life depended on it, but she decided to cook a dish unknown to everyone. Still, the blue leaf lowered her gaze, because she was completely sure that as soon as he tasted this food, he would immediately change his mind. The combination of fresh meat, vegetables, and peanut sauce cannot be bad, so the girl suggested trying to dip meat and vegetables in the sauce. The brunette looked at the blonde and told her that she didn't know what she was doing, so she should try it first. Most likely, as the lady suggested, the man will think that she gave him poison, but he understood that this should not be done with delicious food. In this dish, you must first take cabbage and meat and dip them in a special peanut sauce. After tasting her product, the girl realized how delicious she was cooking, and she let out a long groan of joy. But suddenly, the Duke asked what the girl was holding there. The blonde easily explained everything that her chopsticks were wooden tableware. It was uncomfortable to eat Korean food without chopsticks, so the princess and her nanny prepared them. She smiled, enjoying the wonderful taste, and the brunette realized that there seemed to be absolutely no poison in the food. Red Eyes said that there was a possibility that she used a slow-acting poison, so he decided to wait a little longer. But suddenly, the lady sharply hit the table, startling even the Duke a little, and she shouted that she couldn't wait like this, because if this dish got cold, the taste would disappear. She said that any food tastes best immediately after cooking, so you must eat it right away. She just thought that maybe it was the witchcraft she used to cook. That's why she really wanted to believe him and start doing what the princess says. A bite of the cabbage dish with the peanut sauce mixture went straight into the hungry man's mouth. Pal, after tasting what the girl had prepared, got angry and asked her how she dared to cook him such food. The Duke tasted everything: sweet cabbage with a moderate amount of broth and very tasty, high-quality beef, in addition to peanut sauce that gave it the perfect flavor. It was so tasty that the man was speechless for a moment. However, so that the young cook would not relax, he declared that it was not so bad. But the blonde understood everything perfectly, as her face completely betrayed her. The girl also shared that if you cook delicious noodles, similar to pasta noodles, but a little thicker, and then you add them to the rest of the broth and boil them, they will mix with the broth, and they will turn into a true heavenly delight. But the tall silhouette stood up abruptly and looked at the lady. He said that His Majesty the Emperor, by sending him here, promised him, after the destruction of this empire, if he wanted something. But he had only one wish, because he could get anything he asked for. He didn't even think he would need anything from the small and vile kingdom. But it seems something suddenly appeared. Hearing these words, the lady was surprised, to say the least, so she shouted loudly, "What the hell is going on here?" The man couldn't understand what happened to this girl, but she quickly spoke, interrupting his anxiety, asking him to wait. She asked if the Duke could wish for whatever he wanted, and then, what would happen to her? The brunette explained that he would forbid the princess until she finished her work here, and then he would take her with him to the empire. Luana was discouraged, because in the future she would really have to cook, risking her life. But if there is one thing, then it is much better to choose a beautiful princess with blue eyes and golden hair. But why? When you can also choose a princess with red hair and a fascinating feline gaze. But the Duke only needed. Sue, the girl, tried to explain and preserve her freedom, saying that it was impossible to make such important decisions so quickly. The man simply looked at her and approached, and also hurried to ask her if this girl really dared to defy his decision. Anyway, the Duke ordered the lady to be locked up and fed something, to which his faithful assistant did so. The princess was standing in the kitchen. Her head still hurt from those words about her being the Duke's property. But she had to cook. Still, it was worth fixing the stomach first, and then with unpleasant thoughts and headaches, the lady mixed vegetables with rice, making balls, humming to herself that it would be a very tasty dinner. The Duke's assistant watched her closely and asked her what she was doing, but she replied that if she did it this way, it would be tastier, to which he thought it was some kind of witch spell. The blonde thought that this person also believed she was a witch, realizing how naive people in this world were. In that case, Luana invited the knight to taste her dish. Taking small pieces of rice, she began to make circles, hoping it would turn out tasty. It turned out really bad, and the bite looked ugly. Therefore, the lady asked him to look closely at how she does it, explaining that it is worth cutting the vegetables and the eggs into small pieces, mix them with salty and seasoned rice, and make a ball out of them. She, unlike the knight and faithful assistant of the Duke, turned out to be a perfect rice ball. She explained to him that he could try again, and he would see that the man had large hands, so he could make the ball much bigger than her. The man concluded that this witch was not so evil, but he kept feeling the Duke's gaze on him. When all the rice balls were ready, the princess wished the knight bon appetit. After tasting her pieces, he realized how much he liked the crispy grains of rice, and the sweetness of the well-cooked vegetables and the salty taste were simply delicious. Luana even convinced the redhead to try it, because he also cooked. When he tasted it, he noticed that it was tasty and satisfying. The blonde said she would pack the rest of the food, and she also gave some pieces to the knight, telling him that he could eat with his comrades. The man accepted this gift, but managed to ask if the girl had eaten yet. But she said she would also eat, but she also wanted to give some food to the nanny. Red, hearing this, said this was not necessary. Without saying anything, the knight led the lady to a room. He remembered that the imperial family and the servants were separated. Luana understood that she could not live with her sisters. They would definitely treat her like a servant. Her whole life, the princess was locked in an abandoned palace and suddenly began to be considered part of the imperial family. Upon opening the doors, the blonde thought she had survived the encounter with this psychotic Duke, and that she would surely survive her family, who had abandoned her. It is surprising how the imperial family lost all their dignity over a single type of food. But the appearance of the princesses running after the rice balls was no different from that of wild dogs. The knight was thinking about all this when suddenly he was called by his name. Gold-haired asked how his task was going, to which he replied that he had finished everything, and he wanted to finish his shift and rest. The man said that he also had just finished everything and was starving. He handed over the rice ball that the princess had gifted him when asked what it was. He replied that these were the rice balls that he and the princess made in the abandoned palace. Golden was surprised that the princess made this, because the ball smelled very rich and even appetizing. While contemplating the new type of dish, an aggressive Duke managed to approach the knights. The men immediately stood up, calling him master, but he only repeated his words. The knight said that these were rice balls that he and the princess made in an abandoned palace. At this, the black-haired man only thought about how calculating this girl was. Meanwhile, the young princess's sisters were fighting over her food, shouting all sorts of nonsense. The girl looked very unpleasant, to the point of crying because her rice balls ended up on the floor. But suddenly, her older sister reached out to the blonde, offering her to sit with her because it was cold on the floor. As expected, the protagonist was different from the others. She was locked up, deprived of all privileges, but she still looks so beautiful. Right now, the time has come to treat the main character at this moment. Luana was very happy to have kept the last one. The girl handed the blonde a rice ball, although she would save it to eat tomorrow morning. When Ingrid saw the delicious food in front of her, she didn't even think for a minute. Then she apologized, because she herself had made something like this without realizing it. That said, this will not happen again, and my sister can eat. While everyone was fighting over the rice balls, Ingrid, perhaps deliberately giving in. She remained still. Of course, she is also very hungry. Even though she looks like a doll, she is still a person, which means she is also hungry. Luana smiled sweetly and decided to give her piece of food to the girl. But she denied it, saying it belonged to the princess. But the blonde had eaten enough before coming to this place. In that case, the heroine decided to do something different and split the ball in half. She decided that half would be enough for her, and also thanked Luana for sharing it. The girl became more and more convinced that Ingrid was not only beautiful with her face, but also with her soul, and now it was clear why the emperor and the duke were rubbing their heads because of her. In an instant, the duke entered this room where the royal family members were. Pointing at the princess, she didn't understand again what this man wanted from her, but he just looked away. And he ordered her to follow him. It was his order to lock her up here, so his actions became even more incomprehensible. But anyway, since you told me to go, it would be worth going. Suddenly, the main character defended her sister, saying that it was rude, and that he would not allow his younger sister to be treated like his property. In response, he received a question from the duke, which meant aggression and readiness to attack. In a moment, a group of guards was already running to grab this insolent woman. They grabbed Luana, then let her go and immediately took Ingrid by the arm. But seeing what was happening, the girl began to scream, calling her sister. She knelt in front of the man, but he said that no one would bother them now. The duke simply looked coldly at the princess and ordered her to follow him to the kitchen. There, the girl asked what she could cook and what the ruler himself wanted. The brunette said that he really wanted to eat what she prepared for his subordinate. Just in case, the lady clarified if he meant rice balls, which turned out to be an accurate guess. She didn't understand if the duke had really burst into the room for this. He had sent his sister to prison and brought her to the kitchen in the middle of the night. The girl would really like to send him to hell, but she just smiled sweetly and asked why in the middle of the night, to which he threateningly asked if the princess really didn't want to. Not to anger him, Luana revealed that she was only a professional at cooking at night. And then she started, and the brunette ordered that from now on the girl would cook only for him. He forbids her from cooking for his subordinates and her sisters, because the duke does not like to share his things with others. The blonde said she understood everything, but her vegetables were already burning. In that case, the man said that if she understood, then let her continue doing what she was doing. When he left, Luana clutched her heart because he scared her very much, because he always gets very close when he says something. The brunette just looked coldly and left. As he was eating her rice balls, the girl even wondered if he was chewing before swallowing them. The speed at which he ate the rice balls was as if he wasn't chewing anything. Finally, when the plate was empty, the man let out a slight sigh. He said he had finally eaten enough, but in reality it was natural, because the man ate a portion for 6 people. And only after that, she was finally released. The girl was about to go to her room, but the duke said she would go with him to the room where he was staying. To the princess's surprise, the brunette repeated that she would go to the room where he was staying. She laughed awkwardly, repeating this sentence again. The girl couldn't understand at all why she had to go there. Luana doesn't seem to have the ability or courage to escape on her own. But the duke believed that this girl had to be kept in sight. Anyway, the lady thought that this was the duke's room, so there must be a lot of space there. The princess knew that she would rather be locked in a room with the princesses and treated like a servant. Because he is a duke, it is clear why he uses a room like this. But the lady easily realized that the duke was very skinny, even if it was not so noticeable in his clothes. As the man was changing his clothes, the lady apologized for looking, justifying herself by saying that he started to undress too suddenly for her to look in another direction. The girl immediately thought in her head that it would be better if she were locked in the princess's room. The blonde couldn't understand what the man had been eating all this time, that he had such a thin body. also thought that he really only tastes her food. The Duke asked what the princess was thinking, because he had already finished dressing. The blue-eyed girl noticed that as soon as he took off his scary clothes, the atmosphere immediately changed. Although he should have quickly taken back his words, the girl asked if the brunette really planned to sleep hugging a sword, to which he replied that even if he fell asleep, due to the curse, his sleep would be superficial. The blonde also decided to ask a question about whether it is true that a man cannot taste food. But the red-eyed one was confused by the fact that the witch was asking questions about the curse, to which she ignored him, saying that curses were not her specialty, so she didn't know anything about it. To this answer, the Duke said that he could taste. But what will be tasty for others, for him, is given a. Even dishes consisting of water, for a man are nothing more than sewage. But what the girl cooked with this food, he could taste the real food. The princess realized that this is why he was so happy to taste her rice balls. Drawing his sword, the Duke asked what was suddenly happening. The lady decided to ask these questions, thinking that he was planning something when he fell asleep. But so that the brunette would not worry, Luana decided that she would lie down first and fall asleep. When the palace was captured, the girl had two choices: execution or eternal prison. She thought that this life was over once and for all. But they do not behead her. She can still eat delicious homemade meals and lie on a warm bed, not on the prison floor. And all this because the Duke behaved too unexpectedly. What if she is the only one who can cook delicious food for the cursed Duke? Maybe she shouldn't stop there. As she fell asleep, the girl kept thinking about her own future. If you think about it, Sister Ingrid and Nanny, will everything be fine with them? The princess remembered the moments when she, still very young, ran around and shouted calling her Nanny. She was afraid of being alone, so she always asked where this wonderful woman was. That day, the blonde had a very scary dream. The evil Duke called her a witch and forced her to cook constantly. The nanny said it was a very strange dream. Hugging her, the girl whispered to her that thank God it was a dream, because she was very scared. Touching the woman, she realized that her body was too stiff. The princess woke up and realized that she was not touching the nanny, but the Duke. The man simply looked into her eyes confusedly and called her a witch again. The Duke called the lady impertinent, saying that she first said she wasn't going to do anything, and then she got into his bed. The way she climbed on top of him, wrapping her arms around his broad chest. At this, the blonde shouted that she needed to be moved away, but the knight said he could not move the lady away. But he wondered since when the princess could touch him so recklessly. The girl fell to her knees and began to ask for forgiveness, asking how she could make up for it. To start with, the brunette said she was very hungry. At this, Luana jumped into the kitchen and said she would start immediately. She aggressively took out the meat, cursing herself for being crazy. It seems the girl's body does not read the atmosphere at all. She didn't understand what the hell she was doing in his bed. No, from the beginning, it was impossible to sleep in the same room with the Duke. So this would not have happened. Now it was worth concentrating, because if the blonde couldn't cook a good dish, she would lose not only her finger, but also her head. She was mentally reciting the recipe, or rather, that you have to finely chop the beef and pork, pour the milk and crumbled bread and mix. Season with various spices, tomato sauce, chopped onion and cheese. Then shape it like bread and bake in the oven. In the remaining time, we could prepare potato salad with vegetables. The girl had almost finished, so she asked if anything else was needed. But suddenly, one of the knights entered the kitchen and asked how soon the dishes would be served. Because the situation was getting difficult, His Highness the Duke began to sharpen his sword. Hearing this, the princess realized that they would manage without soup today. After all, if he waits too long, he will get even angrier. The man, as usual, was in his room and waiting for wonderful dishes. After the Duke sighed, the blonde started to get nervous. Meatloaf was on the menu today. The girl explained that it is eaten with potato salad. The girl handed him the dish, to which the man invited her to sit at the table, not tolerating refusals. In a moment, the lady realized that it was a table for two. The Duke didn't eat anything. Apparently, he wanted the princess to check again for poison, but he didn't ask. And he started eating right away. He offered food to the blonde again, but she was very nervous. Luana couldn't understand what the knight was thinking, even if his head fell off his shoulders tomorrow. Then he will eat up to the last crumb. This meatloaf had a soft texture, like warm bread, with a juicy juice that was released when chewed. And the taste of the aromatic tomato sauce that permeated every piece of meat was perfect. Having fully enjoyed the taste of the tenderest meat, the girl decided to take the potato salad with a spoon. It was such a fresh taste that it changed the atmosphere. Both dishes turned out very tasty, but the lady couldn't figure out why the Duke was also eating. The blonde asked when he managed to eat everything, as she made a portion especially for 5 people to extend the duration of the meal. But the plate turned out to be empty when the girl started eating potato salad. After all, the Duke ate at such a speed that it was as if he wasn't eating, but drinking water or tea. Smiling, the princess asked if the Duke liked the food, to which he replied that everything was quite rich. The girl was only happy, but the man said it was a shame because if he cut off her hands, she wouldn't be able to cook so deliciously. That's why the princess expressed gratitude when he said that this was why he would let her get away with what happened last night. But still, they had to resolve several urgent issues. The girl immediately imagined many hands touching her. She shouted that the knight had forgiven her for last night because he said so. The blonde did not like his scornful look at all because he liked the food, but he spoke harshly and ordered the lady to be taken away. The servants took the girl to the bathhouse and tried to clean her. Luana asked if the servants had decided to subject her to submarines. The redhead maid said she didn't know what kind of misunderstanding arose. But His Highness, the Duke simply ordered Lady Luana to be washed and changed. Moreover, even if the Duke began to harm the person with whom he spent the night, the Blue Blade was surprised by this task and began to scream that they had misunderstood everything. In that case, the maid decided to cut the princess's nails, but the girl kept screaming, not understanding why no one was listening to her. The blonde was changed and washed now. She looked very good. That's it. The Duke begins to be sarcastic and says that now at least you can look at her. He also added that the princess's hands were clean, but the rest of her appearance ruined everything. But whatever the reason, it was the first time she had worn such a beautiful dress. Because when the lady lived in an abandoned palace, she didn't dress better than a maid. She thought that, first of all, it was worth thanking the man. The girl turned to him, but he insisted too much and she became embarrassed. She wanted to thank him, but she felt the touch of another person warming her cheek. The knight said it was little nonsense, when suddenly one of his subordinates called him. They told him that a princess locked in a dungeon was asking for an audience. The princess realized that we were talking about the main protagonist, Sister Ingrid. The blonde really did not want to go back to the dungeon, but the man dragged her with him. The girl simply asked what this Duke had in mind, or rather, asked what he was trying to achieve by locking the lady here. She began to shout that since she was imprisoned, he hadn't come, suggesting that he wanted to make her feel weaker than him. Ingrid had no idea what kind of evil plans the knight had in mind, but she declared that the Duke could not break her will. At this, the red-eyed one only asked to continue so as not to break down. He laughed and said that the girl had simply wasted her time. And from now on, if she wants to talk, she will talk to the guard. Ingrid shouted her sister's name, asking if she was all right, and this tyrant did nothing to her. She was surprised, because even being in prison, she was still worried about her younger sister. So she replied that everything was fine with her. What this heroine was doing was much more important, so Luana asked to follow her. The girl apologized and asked for a little more patience. The princess left the detention cell simply by running away. The Duke just cursed, saying that the lady had forgotten that she could not act as she pleased. So the man asked her to follow him. He also handed the girl a lit lantern. Just in case, the blonde asked if they were feeding the imperial family, to which the knight replied that he was going to kill her, so he didn't want to waste food on her. Blue Eyes was horrified by how ruthless this ruler was. The princess tried to find out if it was possible to keep Ingrid alive, but the black-haired man said it was not worth it. And then he noticed that the lady asked too many questions. So that the man wouldn't ask her about this, the girl just asked if he was hungry. The knight wondered why it was so dark in the kitchen when the princess was trying to cook something delicious. The blue-eyed girl thought about the most delicious dish she could prepare with the ingredients currently available. Because it could not be allowed to be simply edible, she decided that she needed to take advantage of this opportunity. The girl even irritated the knight a little with her questions to change the subject. So the knight replied that it would soon be time for lunch, and he was gradually starting to get hungry. He wondered why Luana suddenly asked, since it was her responsibility to make sure he didn't go hungry. The girl replied that there was nothing like that. But if this dish is delicious, then maybe the Duke will allow her to give food to the imperial family. And to the maids. She couldn't even imagine if a man could do this for someone like her. After these words, the lady decided to make sure not to say anything unnecessary. She was afraid that the Duke would say she was arrogant, and generally, how dare she make such an offer first? But he just asked why the girl decided to make such an offer. As the Duke said before, most, if not all, will be executed, because in any case they are the imperial family of the occupied empire. Whether they die by execution or starvation, the result will be the same. So, how much does the girl ask to feed them? Moreover, from what the knight heard, they called the girl abandoned princess, and they neglected her, and in this he is right. In the face of such a statement, the princess couldn't even say anything. The girl grew up in an abandoned palace, so when she first saw her family, she didn't even recognize her father, the emperor. But she didn't care who he was. And isn't it too scary to let them starve? Moreover, her creed is that even if she loses weight tomorrow, it is worth eating something tasty. The brunette understood everything, so he asked the girl to shut up because he would accept her offer. However, only if the princess prepares food that even the Duke will consider delicious. Finally, in the kitchen, Luana hit the table with her hand and shouted that she had already decided everything. If this is the same dish, then the blonde is sure that even the picky Duke will say it was delicious. First, it was worth cutting the clean chicken into portions. Without overlapping, soak in milk to remove the odor. When the smell disappears, we salt and pepper, add a little wine, garlic, and chili. We dip it in batter, and it's ready. Next, the most important thing is high-temperature oil. At this time, oil is very expensive to use all at once and a lot. But this is the imperial kitchen. So as expected, everything is different here. It is worth frying so that a crispy crust forms. The Duke's affairs were over, and he could soon return to the empire. Now it was necessary to choose a prisoner whom he would take with him when he returned. He remembered how the witch asked that if her dish was delicious, then she would be given permission to give food to the imperial family and to the maids. But if you think about it, why did the man agree to such an absurd condition? If it had been anyone else, the brunette would have pulled out her impudent tongue, and he would have cut it off. Although the princess's squeal was quite amusing, there was no need to agree to it at all. It was about food. The Duke did this because he was curious what dish the witch was so confident about that she would be the first to offer him this kind of condition. He even thought of using a trick. Even if this dish was tasty, he would simply refuse to fulfill the condition. Finally, the food was completely ready, and the girl decided to serve it right away. Today's menu includes fried chicken, potatoes, and beer. The girl said that chicken goes perfectly with beer. She also said that the chicken is marinated in a secret sauce and fried twice in oil, so it comes out very crispy. But the man only thought that he had ordered the girl to change her clothes. And she was dirty again, reading this as the fact that she cooked with such passion. The brunette said she doesn't drink beer because she prefers wine, and the blonde said she shouldn't say that. But try it once with chicken. The pale woman asked him to eat everything before it got cold, to which he was again rude, asking her to shut up. Red Eyes began to take care of the food, but the lady couldn't understand why he wasn't saying anything. Sensing the wonderful taste, the picky boy seemed to have found himself in a field. He was surprised by his poor imagination, because it was as if he were in a field of drunks. After this wonderful taste, the man only asked the name, although he finally spoke. He asked what they were called, but for some reason, the girl began to dictate the name of the dish. But the Duke didn't need this at all. He asked what his cook was called. The blonde smiled, and trembling with surprise and fear before His Majesty, called herself Luana, saying that she already knew the name. At this, the red-eyed man put the fork with the chicken in his mouth again, and said he would remember her name. The Duke shows interest in the princess from the abandoned palace. These rumors have already spread, as she was in his bedroom, but she was still alive. Moreover, he left her by his side. With her qualities, Ingrid would have no problem falling in love with the Duke, but the one she chose would be a dwarf. The knight, or rather the Duke's own assistant, left food for the imperial family, saying that from today they will bring food twice a day, and that it is worth thanking the Duke's generosity when they eat. The emperor couldn't understand why they were locked up here to starve, and suddenly they decided to feed them. But his wife heard rumors circulating behind the doors that a princess from an abandoned palace was hanging around the Duke. Maybe she somehow contributed to it. The man was quite surprised because he didn't even remember her. But his wife said that this child would do them good. Upon hearing this news, the girl became very happy. The Duke asked her to stop asking questions constantly because he could understand everything right away. The princess apologized and explained that she was very happy, but who knew that he would order the distribution of food to the imperial family? She didn't say that this food was delicious until the end, so the girl thought she had failed, and he was just ashamed to say it out loud. The blonde cannot express in words how happy she is that her sister Ingrid is no longer hungry. She started saying that the man seemed to like it very much, as he ordered to cook the same thing for dinner as for lunch. Hearing this, His Majesty asked why she was dissatisfied, but the lady didn't want to say that at all. The princess announced in advance that the fried chicken was very tasty, but in fact, there is something even more special. When asked what it was, the girl explained that she meant chicken in sauce. The brunette's eyes widened in surprise, because he didn't know they were making something else with chicken. Luana said that you can cook soy sauce chicken or prepare mustard sauce and eat it with onions. You can also marinate the chicken in cream sauce. Faced with this story, the Duke got angry when he realized that the lady, among the many forms of this dish, served the simplest one, to which the girl asked not to get angry. Everything she said could not be cooked at that moment. The blonde said there are no necessary ingredients. The man said that if the girl named them, he would find everything. But she refused because she could make the necessary seasonings herself. But this is not enough at all. The princess has never managed to prepare the necessary ingredients, so she will have to go through trial and error. For this there is neither time nor budget. The Duke's servant immediately threw a pile of gold on the table and asked if it was a lot. But this amount of coins was more than enough. Luana considered the man a cruel and ill-tempered person, but now she took back her words. His Majesty gave permission to use it freely if the girl needed it for cooking, but she shouldn't try to put it into something strange. The blue-eyed one said that first she would go to the kitchen, check the availability of ingredients, and then buy everything she needed. As she was about to leave, the princess suddenly stopped, turned around, and thanked the Legion Lord, saying that she would make sure he ate the most delicious chicken in sauce. Faced with such nobility, the knight was very surprised to be called by his name. Happy that the girl was given money, she sang and danced. She mumbled quietly that first she needed to mix a spicy red seasoning, made from ground red pepper, and then make soy sauce and a thick paste made from soybeans. But suddenly, the princess didn't even notice that she had bumped into someone, and she started apologizing, saying she was too excited. In an instant, Mrs. Luana's hand was taken by the palms of another person. The blonde was surprised that someone knew her here. The unknown silhouette said that it was impossible not to know Mrs. Luana, because she was the precious younger sister of His Majesty, the princess. Layla introduced herself, calling herself His Majesty's maid. There was no time, so she decided to get straight to the point. The girl explained that His Majesty asked to convey something to Luana. His Majesty Lijan had scrambled eggs and runny yolk for breakfast. In fact, the whole meal consisted of ham and cheese toast, fried eggs, tomato salad with ricotta cheese, and yogurt juice. The Duke noticed that his cook was unusually quiet today. But suddenly, the girl was distracted from her thoughts by a question from a man who was dissatisfied with the fact that all this was food, to which she said she was gradually beginning to understand. Approximate amount of what Mr. Legion eats. By the way, the man would like to talk about how the lady addresses him. Lijan asked when he allowed the blonde to call him by name, but only then did the girl realize that she had called the Duke by name. The girl started saying something about thinking that calling him Duke would be a bit tiring for him. The lady simply, when he asked her name, thought that they had gotten a little closer and became less formal. His Majesty told the princess not to tremble so as not to drop the dishes, adding that he didn't care about that treatment. Quickly fleeing from the Duke, the lady couldn't believe it. She thought that this powerful and evil man could simply ignore the treatment mistake. Usually he would have said he would cut off her unpleasant tongue, but he remained silent and simply asked for more. Most likely, all this is due to the girl's wonderful cuisine. Now that I think about it, in recent days his face has become rounder and he seems less irritable. The girl thought that if eating his food changed the Legion, then this would be very beneficial. But suddenly, the girl pushed the lady away, saying it was her. She asked if the princess used what he gave her. But this is exactly what Luana wanted to talk about. Just as the lady was about to say what she needed, a knight appeared from behind and asked her who she was talking to. She didn't even have time to look back before she started wondering since when Sir Raugun was doing things here. The blonde called him strange, saying that just now there was a maid in this place, saying that last time Lord Legion gave her clothes, but alas, she got dirty, so they were talking about washing her. The man didn't even look at this and asked if it was true, but he came to convey the Duke's will to the witch. Because for dinner, he wanted a fried chicken dish. In this case, the princess decided that she would immediately start cooking. Once in the kitchen, the girl sighed with relief. She took what the maid gave her, with a note saying that the liquid in the bottle should be mixed with food, and that it should be poison. Upon hearing shouts from outside, saying that Mrs. Luana should not close the door, she apologized and immediately hid the bottle. The girl couldn't understand why they had suddenly entrusted this to her. No, if they had a conscience, they wouldn't have done something shameful. They hadn't paid attention to her before. And now the girl is suddenly a dear younger sister. The princess didn't know how it was possible to add poison to the food she eats so sweetly. Deciding that she needed to get rid of this disgusting thing, the girl frowned. If they caught her doing something like that, then this time the head of the sixth princess would fall off her shoulders. Moreover, she couldn't get rid of an important figure just because of parents who weren't them. As soon as the opportunity arises, Luana will throw this unpleasant thing out the window or pour water on it. But there was so much to do that the blue-eyed girl couldn't get rid of the poison. As soon as she wakes up, she will look for a way to throw it away again. For a start, it was worth not losing it ahead of time. The Duke woke up the princess and asked why she started trembling, since she had recently eaten jerky with cheese, or something else in front of him. The man said that, when he finished with everything here, he would take Luana to the Empire as a prisoner of war, but that he needed her until he found a normal witch. He showed the emperor the girl, and then left her life in the duchy. Therefore, Lijan wanted the lady to stop acting as if she was going to eat her. The blonde was surprised by the request to be calmer or the order to change habits. His Majesty asked if the cook was listening to him, but so that she wouldn't come closer. The girl shouted that she had heard everything. He was angry that the princess didn't look him in the eyes when she answered, so he quickly took the blanket off her. By bothering the blonde, she accidentally ended up on top of the man, but he just smiled, because he thought about the lady's intentions, even though he himself threw her down. The blue-eyed girl started shouting loudly, trying to show that she wanted to turn over, and the knight took the blanket off her. But suddenly, a bottle of poison fell out of the witch's pocket. Taking it from the blonde, the Duke asked her if it was poison. She tried to justify herself by saying that she really didn't know. The man said that this bottle fell out of the princess's pocket, and she couldn't help but know what it was. The lady hid the poison, while the Duke invited her to communicate calmly. It was interesting, except for the fact that Luana is a witch. She shouted that there was a misunderstanding, but His Majesty opened the bottle and began to drink the poison. The blonde snatched the bottle from the Duke's hands with her hand, saying why he did that, but the man said he wished he had died from it. Red Eyes said that he is immune to most types of poisons. The girl grabbed him by the neck and shouted that he couldn't just take and drink an unknown poison for him. After all, His Majesty didn't even listen to her, but the brunette doesn't take care of his body at all. Suddenly, one of the knights entered the room and asked what had happened, because the guy heard loud shouts. But the knight saw another seductive image when the lady grabbed the man by the neck and whispered to him quietly why he wasn't taking care of his body. Instead of understanding the situation, the subordinate apologized and left, wishing them a good rest. To the princess, it sounded like a curse on the reputation of both, so she started apologizing and said she was very worried, to which the brunette said it wasn't poison at all. He touched the girl, to which she shouted at the Duke to move away. So as not to do anything wrong, the master ordered Luana to leave. He stated that they would talk later about what happened. Leaving the room, one of the knights did not understand why the girl left so quickly. Well, she left the room because something interesting was planned. He shared that the Duke asked him to give the girl a separate room, so she should follow him. The blue-eyed girl was embarrassed to ask, but still asked if everything was all right with Mr. Lion. The Duke gradually began to understand that the princess used an aphrodisiac on him. It was of good quality, and the purity of the drug itself was very high, and he knew that this stupid princess could not prepare such a thing. The man sent her close, and now rumors will run through the palace, although they have always been there. Maybe they lied to him by saying it was poison. Instantly, a familiar silhouette appeared in his room. He ordered his subordinate to find out about this. He guessed who might have done this, but it is necessary to urgently check everything. The Duke spared their lives and even allowed them to eat his food, and they still don't know their place. The girl was very surprised when they told her about the execution. They were executed at dawn, and their bodies were hung in front of the castle gates. It was very sudden, so the knight came to her. He asked if the princess knew about this, and the girl remembered the situation when she was sitting right on top of the Duke. The blonde asked what was in the pan, and if it was food for the Duke. She didn't know what he drank yesterday, but she prepared light food. To which the man asked where her desire to cook came from. If yesterday the princess was very picky, he really bothered her, especially with his request to help the girl. The boy understood that the blonde was uncomfortable being near the Duke. The knight offered to take the food to his office. The princess didn't understand why the boy felt sorry for her, even if she was the youngest princess of a destroyed country, and without relatives. But the blue-eyed one felt really uncomfortable seeing Legion. But the blonde refused to do anything on an empty stomach. To this, the princess said that she would feed him. When the girl started cooking, she noticed that everything was too quiet. After the execution, the lady felt nothing and was not sad at all. They were not her biological parents. This shows her appeal to the princess. The most important thing was that the witch was more worried about Ingrid. All this was just for a letter. Courteous rejection of unpleasant insinuations. Just because of this, the empire was on fire. Sisters and brothers were locked up, and their parents were killed. Ingrid cried and shouted that she would not forgive, repeating over and over again that she would never be able to forgive. The Duke was served breakfast, to which he asked why his subordinate brought food to him, and not to his personal chef, to which he replied that they asked, and the Duke asked what Luana was doing. Meanwhile, the blonde was washing soybeans in the kitchen. The knight carefully realized that he had offered in vain to bring the dishes prepared by the princess. Today's menu was based on beef and tomatoes, potatoes, carrots, and a bouquet garni. Cook for a long time, and you get pot au feu. The man thought that normally meat is fried. During cooking, many expensive spices are added, and usually the Duke doesn't taste them. It didn't seem to have any great taste. Along with the vegetables, the beef reveals its taste. Hot potatoes and sweet carrots bring lightness, and the bitter taste of tomatoes brings pleasure. And the delicious, thick broth combined well with all the ingredients. If the decision was made after eating, then the man would change his mind about sending all the witch's relatives to execution. His Majesty wondered why the girl ordered the knight to bring food while she remained in the kitchen. Most likely, this happened last night, or she is on strike due to the execution of her parents. They started following her yesterday, and now Legion will know what she does without her. His Majesty walked through a beautiful rose garden. She learned that Legion had executed the emperor and empress of the fallen country. It turns out that he will soon return to the empire. The woman asked if the Duke had done everything she asked. Upon a positive answer, she said it was very good news. Then she announced that they would be preparing to meet the war hero. The girl thought that now she needed to soak everything she washed for 8 hours, and then steam it. She said she needed to find a suitable fabric, when suddenly the Duke appeared in the kitchen. Scaring her, she started apologizing for messing up the man's clothes. The lady asked if the brunette really didn't like anything, but everything was fine, except that the cook himself did not bring the food to His Majesty. The blonde kept apologizing, to which the knight said they had already arrived, so she should pack her things. The lord also stated that they were returning to the empire, but the witch only asked if she could take food in her luggage. She had leftovers of jerky with cheese and fruit jam that she had prepared earlier, but the man didn't care. But the lady said there was nothing more important than food, and the Duke asked in vain. The girl didn't understand why they were returning to the empire so quickly, but just as the witch thought, Ingrid will go with them, but their security is so strong that the princess will not be able to get close to her sister. The princess asked how much time they had left, to which they replied that none at all. The lady started giving the Duke whole wheat bread with dried veal slices and cheese, and the main course, the tenderest corn soup. She asked if this was enough, but the Duke had already said it all. This was much better than gnawing the ground, thinking about food that could not be obtained. The princess wondered if the man was really talking about her curse like that. The blonde said that, when they reached the empire, they should immediately send her to the estate. But His Majesty explained that the lady would also come to the emperor. She must show His Majesty her trophy, which Luana completely forgot about. She thought they would be separated for a while, but since they were already talking about it, the man decided to tell the girl to remember that under no circumstances should she fall in love with His Majesty, the emperor. But the girl is not the type of person who can fall in love just like that. But whether it is easy or not, everyone is the same in front of the emperor. So even if the Duke said it, it wouldn't work. But she didn't understand how he could talk about it like that, because he doesn't even know her tastes. But you can't be that self-confident. Legion stated that if she suddenly became able to overcome his charm, he would punish her. In the center of the empire, the entire populace began to shout and give glory to the empire and their victory. The emperor was not the only one waiting impatiently while the people rejoiced. The boys went through a difficult road, and the emperor said they were welcome to the empire. Ingrid just whispered that His Majesty had no right to say those words with his dirty tongue. But when the man asked what the lady didn't like, she replied that he destroyed her home and called the emperor a narcissistic jerk. But who knows, if the princess had listened to him from the beginning, then there would have been no trouble. There is terrible pressure in his gaze. Instantly, His Majesty remembered Sir Ligena. The blonde said he had come a long way and done a good job, which made him happy. However, he was more interested in who Luana was. The Duke reminded him that he had promised him something before the campaign, that he could take anything to the empire, but only one person or one thing. The emperor asked why the Duke was attracted to this stupid creature. The man took everyone aside and ordered them to keep their distance. Everyone really moved away, because this was the emperor's order. The girl simply took out 2 types of onions and smiled. His Majesty asked if by bringing such a charming girl, the man was really trying to embarrass him so much. But now the conversation was not about that at all. This seemed strange to the knight. Does it make any sense to take along a princess who has no special talents anywhere except cooking? But the dishes she cooks are simply incredible. The emperor noticed why the brunette gained so much weight, because before he was very thin. It was hard to notice in the crowd, but now he had gained a lot of weight. The blonde said he wanted his precious knight to stay with the youngest princess, as promised, but only warned that this charming girl should not be left alone. He just looked away, but the emperor simply gave him advice. His Majesty noticed that this princess had something to do with his curse. The lady entered the kitchen and looked at the availability of ingredients. She didn't know what she would cook in the imperial palace, but there was no point in worrying about the ingredients. Meat dishes at this time are mainly cooked grilled or steamed with spices. If they are fried, the girl is sure that they will be very tasty, even for the emperor. But they could get tired of eating the same dish all the time, in which case, the princess thought about making something different. First, the meat must be cut into medium pieces. Add a little pepper and salt, then mix all this with chopped garlic, flour, cold water for flavor, and beer. It is also necessary to knead the dough with small pieces of meat. While the dough was resting, the lady diced the remaining ingredients. Fry them in oil, and when they are almost cooked, add sugar, lemon juice, and water with starch. The lady gave many orders in the kitchen, asking, for example, to wait for the meat to cool down. Finally, the time for the test arrives. It was worth carefully frying it in a pan. The result was a sweet and sour sauce and crispy pork. After tasting it, the girl realized that only 2% of soy sauce was missing, but it turned out quite tasty. She thought that Sir Legion should be given as much as possible, and the emperor in moderation. By the way, the blonde thanked the imperial chefs for their help. She also apologized for bursting into their kitchen like that. The girl said that a little later she would clean the entire kitchen and then went to serve the dish. The princess finished a little earlier than the emperor expected. This dish does not require much time. The imperial chef even helped the witch a little, which is why she got out so quickly. The blonde suggested eating, while everything was still hot and tasty. But suddenly, the girl realized that she had mixed up the dishes. The name of that dish was sweet and sour pork. It's like frying pork and veal. But the lady is sure that the Duke is simply furious now. The blonde looked at the fried pork with an arrogant look, and later announced Sir Legion. After tasting the food, the man said there was no poison. But the lady was already very upset, because it seemed she would have to fry everything again. Luana also talked about the pork sauce. If you prefer the soft and moist texture of the meat, you can add a little sauce. Taking a small piece, the blonde brought it to his mouth. Feeling this wonderful taste, the man was surprised. The emperor invited the princess to visit his modest palace occasionally, which surprised her a little. Upon hearing this, the Duke got up from the table. He looked at His Majesty's dish and declared that it was his portion. The man smiled because his subordinate cared so much about this food. The brunette said that their dishes were mixed up and there was a mistake. It turned out quite awkward, so the emperor suggested swapping dishes. And again, this girl surprised the master. He didn't know she would do him such a favor. To this, the yellow-eyed one asked the young cook to cook something else. He really liked this dish. It was even very unusual. But the emperor feared not having enough of what the lady had prepared. The princess said that if he waited a minute, she would cook more. The girl said that this dish itself is delicious, so it's worth adding more soy sauce to it. The blonde asked the Duke if the emperor liked today's menu, to which he asked if Luana really liked cooking that much. He seemed very angry, very likely angry, because their portions were mixed up. You can't tell by him that he's joking by asking about those things. The blue sheet thought, and replied that she wanted the man to like her dish more than his majesty's. To this, he replied that the lady had strange desires. And were all witches really like this? The girl said that no one would die if the master praised her once. But the brunette suddenly remembered how the emperor asked if the princess was related to his curse. But since she realized it, there was no point in hiding. The man said that she was the witch's student, and besides, she didn't know about her curse. So now he wanted to keep her close to him to get more information. His Majesty asked not to worry, because he was also interested in this witch. But now, he was more worried about his subordinate. After all, is it really impossible to cope with his curse without outside help? To this, the blonde received a completely negative and brief answer. The Lord said that animals are also tamed with food. Surely he will get bored for a while. The Duke invited the girl to stay in the palace. The place where the lady lived was completely different from this mansion. It looks better than her abandoned palace. The witch asked where the Duke himself was going, to which he replied rudely that it was none of her business. The girl noticed that the man looked strange today. The butler approached her and told her that she could trust him. The old man asked to follow him, but the princess was tormented by her conscience because her grandfather was dragging her things. He showed her her new room, telling her that the maid would come tomorrow and that if the lady needed anything, she should contact him. The grandfather said he was very happy that the girl decided to move to his palace. Moreover, the butler noticed that Luana was very happy. She started telling him that, although the master seems cold on the outside, he is not at all like that on the inside. The gray-haired man sees that the cook is very kind to the Duke. Moreover, he is very handsome, and his fencing skills are excellent. But when the butler started mentioning that Lijon was very rich, affectionate, and kind, the girl asked him to stop. She said she was tired and wanted to rest. Noticing that the witch was not very talkative, he left her alone. When the old man left, the princess was finally alone. She held her head, not understanding at all what was going on here. Lijon is the Duke's youngest son, who should fall in love with Ingrid and now with Luana, the pathetic reincarnation of this hero, who accidentally ended up in her world. Moreover, the girl does not deserve such a fate. Damn it, her life is over. Upon waking up, the blonde looked out the window, wondering what time it was and if she had really fallen asleep. Strange noises were heard in her stomach, which made the lady realize that she wanted to eat. She secretly entered the kitchen, making sure no one was there. And no matter what is in the food cabinet, the princess wants to eat. Otherwise, it would be a shame to starve to death. The main thing is that the ingredients contain everything necessary. First, the witch finally chopped the onion and fried it over medium heat until golden brown. Then I added a little dry bread and brought it to a boil over medium heat. As soon as it boiled, the girl poured in all the milk and finally added pepper and salt to taste. The result was a spicy hot bread porridge, which had a very delicate taste. But suddenly, Luana heard crunching sounds and realized that someone else was in the kitchen too. It was very scary, and the girl began to think that she had imagined it. There was no need to stress out now. Besides, the weather was so nice today. The cool night breeze always passed over her pale skin, leaving a trail of pleasant goosebumps. Instantly, the Duke approached the bench and looked the witch in the eyes. He asked what the girl was doing here at this time. She said she was hungry, to which the man said that then it was necessary to inform the butler about this. But it was too late, and the girl didn't want to bother anyone or wake anyone up. But it is very late, and he is also in a suit. But did the Duke just return to the palace? The brunette sat next to the cook and asked him if he had eaten today. The girl offered to taste his bread porridge, although it didn't look that appetizing. Despite what the lady had prepared to eat, she said she would cook more later. Seeing this mess, His Majesty remembered his disgusting childhood. While eating, he said it was better to drink poison voluntarily than to suffer like this. The butler said that the master needed to eat one more piece, but the boy himself knew it. This liquid was similar to the mixture the butler brought him when he brought him food in liquid form. However, the taste was completely different. Although this food is not so luxurious, it tastes very good. As for food, since the girl arrived in the empire, she has learned a lot about this man. And did the princess manage to earn his trust? It's better to starve than to eat bland food. So, what makes a person happy at times like these? The blonde asked Lord Lydian not to forget to eat. If anything, she could cook something delicious for him. The girl promised that she would fatten up the man properly. The lady really looked like a witch who wanted to feed him and eat him. But the witch said that all these myths about witches are nonsense. So she stuck out her little finger and asked him to promise her. She promises not to eat him and that she will cook what he asks for. And the Duke will promise that he will eat everything she cooks for him. To this, the man ordered not to hold his hand without asking. It seems the cook is too persistent. But the brunette started talking about the word he gave her before coming to the empire. If the girl continues to surprise everyone with her cooking, then he is sure that the princess will achieve a lot. For this, the Duke will give the girl an independent kitchen. She will need it to prepare breakfast tomorrow. For this, the princess only thanked the man, smiling sweetly at him. The maid called the head chef and told him that the Duke had called him. She said that from now on the man will not cook food for him. He shouted that he couldn't, that his day had started perfectly today, that he decided to prepare a banquet for the Duke. The brunette asked if His Majesty was really going to starve to death. He has a person who will cook for him every day, as the maid said. The princess started cooking, thinking that if she went now she would have time. The butler knocked on the kitchen door and said that he had finally found Luana. She was not in the room, so he entered the kitchen and the cook said that she had arrived just in time. She asked where Lord Legion was now. The knight asked the cook to return, but that she was a princess. The Duke also supports her. They must follow orders and he must not do anything stupid. But he, as the best cook in the empire, must prepare the most delicious food for the master. 5 long years, that was the time the man dedicated to cooking for him, and what happened was terrible. Because of this terrible curse, all efforts were in vain. The brunette was furious and was already tired of suffering. He wanted to see with his own eyes who was replacing him. The butler said that the master doesn't eat anything in the morning. Apparently after sleeping, he has no appetite at all. To this, the blonde called the Duke strange, because before he ate her food even in the morning, she thought he always ate well, especially for breakfast. Sebastian knocked on the door, to which the man told him to come in. The cook said that morning had already come, but instantly saw him half naked. She turned around and immediately apologized, but Lijan was more concerned about whether the lady had brought food. The old man knew that the man didn't eat breakfast, but Mrs. Luana prepared it especially for him. Today's menu included soufflé pancakes with fried sausages and bacon, a fresh salad with blueberries, and cheese and hot milk tea. The butler wished him a good meal. The lady said that her batter is not as hard as regular pancakes, which is why the dish feels airy and melts in the mouth. It looked quite tasty and unusual, but the old man didn't understand what happened to the Duke. Because he never ate in the morning, the man picked up a fork again and began to eat the dish the princess had prepared. Surprising the butler, the old man knew that there was an unusual relationship between them, but to achieve this, she noticed that the girl noticed that the Duke had gained a lot of weight recently, and the butler realized that her love was doing wonders. The lady slipped away, thinking about what to cook for lunch. He liked the pancakes so much that he ate up every last crumb. Seeing the head chef in the hallway, Luana approached him and tried to talk to him. He bowed and said his name was Wei, and that he was the chef of this palace. The girl was surprised, because she met the cook everyone talks about, but he had only been looking for her all morning. The cook made a small request. He could not admit that it was now the princess who cooked for the Duke, so he came here in person to check on her skills. But just a moment ago, the man was watching everything that was happening. The brunette simply begged him to have a culinary duet. The cook tried to explain that his life without this job made no sense. The nearest knight passing by noticed that it seemed something interesting was being planned here. Sir Duke asked to join along with Lugard. It would be fair for the knights to supervise the process, but if the lady doubts her skills, she can refuse. The servant apologized to Miss Luana. His name was Garth and he was a kitchen assistant, and he was very happy to meet you. He said she could ignore everything and sincerely apologized for the performance. But the princess was only curious. The Duke, who never ate breakfast, suddenly ate everything Miss Luana had prepared. Everyone was very interested in what kind of dish touched the Duke's stone heart. It was very rude of the assistant, and if the girl doesn't want to answer, then it's no big deal. The blonde took a couple of steps forward and announced that she accepted his challenge. At that moment, in the other wing, there were rumors that it became clear to everyone why the man had gained weight. And he finally looked healthy, but he wondered if he really looked that bad before that. The lady said she would accept the challenge on the condition that they prepare their best dishes. And as for the judges, it was necessary to find one more so that there would be an odd number, entrusting this problem to the knights. In this case, if the tournament could start, the girl announced its beginning. Honestly speaking, this woman is not obliged to compete with the chef now. It's somewhat reckless. If she wins, the Duke will have to kick her out of here. However, she stipulated that the judges were given the best dish. That is, in this way, they could only show their results with one dish. She became the Duke's personal chef thanks to her connections. Therefore, the man is obliged to show her who and how professionals cook. The assistant realized that Wei was trying to prepare Chateaubriand. It was a high-quality steak made from a thick cut of beef. Every cook should know it. By the way, the redhead asked what the lady was going to cook, but she just laughed. The princess planned to create a special dish that no one here had ever tasted. Finally, the ex-chef captivated the judges with his incredible steak. This was one of the best dishes he had ever cooked in his life, and victory was already in his pocket. To this, the girl smiled and said that it looked quite tasty. The princess looked at the chef and asked him to try a piece after the contest, surprising him with her reaction. She is not worried at all about losing, so the man asked her to show him what she had prepared first. Seeing what the girl had prepared for the judges, he asked what it was. It was carbonara with chicken, in which the princess was most confident since it is a duel. She wanted to cook something unique and unusual. The girl asked to eat quickly, because cold food would not be as tasty. Taking a piece of this chicken, the knights and the butler decided to try it. The cook was surprised, because he thought carbonara was a sauce used for pasta. Moreover, the chicken dish is rare, but Luana suggested he try it. After tasting this dish, the man was very surprised by the unusual taste, and he was even stunned. Crispy and melt in your mouth, fried chicken pairs well with the smooth and spicy carbonara sauce, while the spicy aroma of fresh onions and peppers perfectly enhances the taste of the meat. And the sauce, the blonde said it was very tasty. In fact, both chefs are good, but the chef said he lost. He never thought there would be a person who could cook better than him. Wei bowed and said that because of his pride, he caused the lady a lot of trouble. So he asked to be punished. The girl asked him to stand up, because these were not at all the words she wanted to hear from the cook. And if he really meant it, he should help her, because in reality, the girl doesn't know what imperial cuisine is, and the man has been cooking for the Duke for quite some time. So she would like him to help her get used to the palace a little, so the witch asked. To teach her, the cook agreed, because he would love to be in charge of teaching the princess. In the end, everything ended peacefully. The butler couldn't imagine that everything would end this way. Everyone had come to the conclusion that Miss Luana was truly special. And a month had already passed since her arrival at the palace. Going out into the garden with a small barrel, Luana shouted that she had finally succeeded. This time, everything turned out well, although the lady currently could not use what she had been preparing for so long. Since she didn't have shandok, in the end it was difficult to find something similar. She had to dedicate a lot of time and effort to searching for analogs. After soy sauce and soybean paste, the girl needed to make red pepper paste. And finally she could make kimchi, fried rice with it, and kimchi stew. She stared at her creation so much that the man next to her noticed that Luana was drooling. Taking Wei's hand, the princess thanked him because she herself would never have guessed it. The boss smiled and said that he hadn't done anything like that. Meanwhile, the Duke announced to his butler that he would give him a new task. The man asked how old his chef was. He was 20 years old, and despite being so young, he was hired into the Duke's house for his outstanding talent. He was definitely considered a genius, so His Majesty paid him well. But it turned out to be useless. One thing the two have in common is cooking, so it was natural that they became close. The old man asked if the brunette was tired, and also suggested asking Luana to prepare a comforting tea for him. To this, the man said it wouldn't be bad enough. He asked the girl to bring him a delicious tea with a calming effect. The girl looked at him when it came to some kind of reward. He didn't tell the master, but apparently, thanks to the lady's effort, the chef's indignation subsided. It seems she adapted to life in the mansion without major problems. Therefore, the Duke wanted to reward the princess as thanks. But still, the Duke also suddenly asked the blonde what she wanted. He asked for permission to go to the market, because the girl had heard that every 5 days a large trade market gathers along the road. The man was surprised, because cooks are provided with all the necessary ingredients, but it is much more fun to choose them herself, and she wondered what special products were in the empire. Luana was so busy that she didn't even think about it for a second, but if a man was concerned about her, then there would be nothing wrong with refusing. But suddenly, the blonde asked to go with Wei as security, but if the girl wants to go, then the Duke wanted to go with her. He was not busy at all, so you can take a day off. But there is something the lady needs to convey to him. The princess told the chef that there was no need to cook lunch for the Duke either, because starting today, he said he would go to the imperial palace and have lunch and dinner there too. So she was told to only prepare breakfast. The man noticed that the lady was upset because she couldn't cook for the Duke. He was the same, so he perfectly understood her feelings. To cheer up the girl, the cook said that she could handle everything. All this time, he fed her so diligently that it seemed to him that he had become more flexible, as would be the case if his temper deteriorated again from not being able to eat normal food. He will eat there not once but twice. After all, the Duke has a lot of work. It is unlikely that he will be able to cope with everything in 1 or 2 days. The girl decided that since she was washing the dishes, the other dishes could also be washed. His Majesty told the knights that to achieve a goal the size of a man, he must use his shoulder, not his elbow. Today's training is almost over. Today, the knights were fed steak, which was the best meal after training. Because the Duke is used to the witch's food, it is more difficult than usual to eat this disgusting thing. But he has to eat it, because he couldn't eat properly at lunch, but he still needs to have dinner. His Majesty was informed that the Emperor had asked him to come to his hall for an audience. The man said not now, even though his food was untouched. He said he was completely full, and that in the morning everything was still the same. But before the knight left, the princess fed the man. The brunette repeated that all the food would be prepared in the imperial palace. But the girl noticed that Lijian still couldn't taste it. The princess asked the knight not to lie and to stop being stubborn, but just to take his food, because she had already prepared enough. But that was not the problem, because it would be simply inappropriate to take all this. But while the lady was cooking, she didn't understand how such a thing happened. But lunch and dinner are 2 full meals. There is too much food, and the Duke has nothing to carry it with, but the girl offered him a cart. Even if it was a little gloomy, the blue-eyed one still asked to bring these dishes with her, because she put her soul into them. Everyone in the palace was very surprised when they learned that the great Duke had arrived with the carriage. The Emperor said that this was quite surprising, and also asked who was inside. They say there was no one in there. If rumors are to be believed, the cart was packed to the brim with some kind of baskets. This was very timely for the Emperor, because he had just had business with the arriving man, and he asked to call him and ask him. Upon arrival, the brunette asked if His Majesty really wanted to talk about the cart. He believes that this is not something the Emperor should worry about. But clearly, this doesn't happen every day. A duke known only for coming alone to the empire, working, and then returning to his place, brought with him a carriage full of personal belongings, to which the man replied that he was bringing food. The blonde said that couldn't happen, because it was impossible for there to be so much food that he had to bring a cart. The man laughed because it was too much, which made the Duke embarrassed because he didn't know there were so many. In this case, the ruler thought that nothing bad would happen if the Duke shared food with him. It seems the princess is gradually taming Lijian. Even though he only hurt her a little, the man cannot hide that he does not like it. It's good that someone capable of dealing with him has appeared, but there will be difficulties if this hobby goes too far. And the Emperor decides that he can calmly talk to his faithful employee about business. The cook asked the lady what she saw outside the window, to which the lady replied that she was just looking at the garden while stirring the dish. She instantly uttered the words out loud, saying that this was not enough. And the man noticed that this is how it had happened to the girl all day. He realized that the cook almost destroyed his favorite dish, where the containers with soy paste are kept. In sauce, she poured condiments into the wrong jars and also slipped 5 times in the kitchen. The girl said that today was the first time she collected takeout food. She was worried if something had spoiled on the way or if the taste had changed. The chef said he understood the girl, because the chef is always interested in the reaction to his food. Suddenly, butler Sebastian knocked on the door and said that His Highness the Duke had returned. The blonde immediately entered his office and immediately asked him if he liked her lunch box. You must tell him everything so that he takes his mistakes into account in the lunch box he will prepare tomorrow. To which the man briefly announced that it was delicious. He also said that His Majesty also liked this food very much. The girl wondered what the Duke was sharing with the Emperor, because last time he liked the sweet and sour pork. But still, despite all the admiration and positive comments, the brunette asked the princess not to cook tomorrow. Surprised by this statement, the blonde immediately asked why. But the answer was as simple as the question. It turns out that tomorrow Luana will go with the duke to the imperial palace. The next morning, all the servants were worried because the captive princess still didn't eat anything. And this continued for several days in a row. All the servants were afraid that the girl would not last. The entire interior was broken. Without food, Ingrid felt dizzy. It was becoming increasingly difficult to remain conscious. The blonde was sure that if she was patient, she would soon be able to see her mother and her father, who had been executed not long ago. The protagonist began to see glitches. She heard her mother's voice, and when she regained consciousness, she realized that instead of the woman's hand, she was holding a torn curtain. She clutched her head and realized that now she too was tormented by knowledge. Suddenly, the door opened, and Luana appeared in the room, asking if Sister Ingrid was okay. The elder thought again that it was an illusion, but this child seemed too realistic. Tears themselves began to stream down when the younger sister took the girl's hand. His Majesty stated that with so much difficulty and effort she had achieved it, and now she decided to starve herself. The main character grabbed the sheet in her hands and asked her to stop laughing. The blonde realized that all this happened because the man wanted to keep the princess. She said she would rather starve to death than receive it from him. The girl was surprised, even though her younger sister had heard some rumors. But she didn't think it was all that serious. She gave finely ground porridge. It would be better digested in the current state of the main character. But even in this nearly starved state, the blonde asked if her little sister was okay. She was interested because Luana had lost everything: her palace, her parents, her subjects, and her country. They had absolutely nothing left, but the girl only thought about it. Perhaps all this is because what Ingrid lost is different from what she lost. Because the cook lost her worn-out clothes, the small palace where she grew up, and she was imprisoned. A father who was nothing to her, because she couldn't even remember his face except for that. The girl lost nothing. The blonde reminded her sister that she was an abandoned princess and should not forget that. But that didn't mean Luana didn't understand Ingrid's pain. On the contrary, the girl knows this pain well. There was a time when it seemed to her that she had absolutely nothing left. But of course, she didn't think about what she had lost, but about what she had left. Living here and now, the girl could do nothing. And, as a result, it turned out that the lady devoted herself to something as simple as cooking. Ingrid tasted the prepared porridge and already added bitter tears to it. It seemed that the princess couldn't sleep well all this time, so when she fell asleep, Luana called her baby. But suddenly, the emperor himself approached the house and observed the whole situation. He smiled and explained that Ingrid had finally eaten. He tried to touch the main princess's cheek, but the girl did not allow it, saying that her sister was sleeping. The man's gaze changed a lot. The emperor got angry and annoyed, not understanding what was happening. The princess said that Ingrid had just fallen asleep, and even if it was him, His Majesty, it was impossible to touch or wake the lady. So that His Majesty would not get angry, the duke forced the lady to bow, explaining that she was not very smart. When asked why Lijun intervened and apologized for the princess, he replied that he had to answer for his actions, because now the blonde is his person, but the blonde said he didn't want to hear it, so he asked to leave. The man thought he saw a fearless girl blocking the emperor's path, and a ridiculous subordinate covering her. The knight at first laughed, and then wondered if he should kill them both. The duke remembered that the witch asked to save her life. It seems she doesn't understand what saving her life in front of such a high-ranking person is. But his sister lost so much weight that emotions overwhelmed her. From now on, you must be more careful. His Majesty is not what he seems. He is a psychopath who conquered an entire country for his sister Ingrid. When the man was about to leave, his personal chef stopped him and asked if she was his person. He replied that she was a prisoner under his control, and that he should know that a man is responsible for all his actions. The girl was very surprised when she was asked not to take the bags. The butler said that the porters would deliver the purchased food, so it was not necessary. Looking out the window, the old man said that the duke was already waiting for the girl. The blonde shouted that she didn't think the market was so big. This is a town market, so the princess was happy with the fact that it existed, but its size was simply annoying. The girl said that she could really find anything here, when suddenly she bumped into a man walking towards her. She began to be carried away by the stream of people, so the brunette took her hand and pulled her towards him. He said he knew the princess was excited, but she shouldn't leave the duke. Now, if the lady lets go of his hand and gets lost in the crowd, she can escape, which Lishan found amusing. It is unclear whether these were his calculations, or if those thoughts were not in his head at all. Sharply calling the man, the witch pointed to another product, indicating with a gesture that she wanted it. The saleswoman noticed that the lady had a piercing gaze, asking her how much she should put, to which she replied that she needed as much as possible. The brunette asked where the girl was going to use this strange flavor, but she needed to learn the recipe. So right now Luana could not prepare it, but she also added that with it, she could make a very tasty dessert. The blonde thanked the Duke because they were very expensive, but he didn't understand why she was even thinking about it. If the princess hadn't insisted that the man come, she could have bought everything at the market and take it to the kitchen. But if he says so, then the girl concluded that she can buy 10 more, even if she secretly took the purse. Lijan seemed busy after his trip to the palace, so he thought he wouldn't go. But today the Duke fortunately had time. It would be too much to think that he did it for the sake of the witch. The lady wanted to discuss this with the brunette, when suddenly she discovered that he was not there. He said not to go anywhere, but he himself went somewhere. The girl began to be carried away again by the stream, and she was sure that this time she would really fall. A stranger caught her and asked if the girl was okay, because if she had gone further, she would have ended up hurt. His eyes looked like a precious stone, but suddenly, the lady quickly pulled away from the stranger's hands and thanked him. But instantly, the princess noticed that the man had just called her by name. The lady moved a little closer and asked him intrusively if he knew her. He suddenly declared that Alani's son is the son of all of them. But before the man could finish speaking, a sword appeared under his throat. The Duke asked him to think carefully before identifying himself, because depending on the answer, he could slit the stranger's throat. The princess tried to stop him, saying that this man was only talking to her, and killing over such a trifle would be the stupidest thing possible. The stranger said there was too much noise here, so they would see each other next time, and they would disappear in an instant. The blonde was banging on the door and shouting if anyone was outside. The servants listened as the lady tried to shout for them to allow her to speak with Legion. At least for a minute, my nerves started to get the better of me, and the blue-eyed girl said this was serious, because as soon as they returned from the market, the Duke locked her in a room and held her hostage. That truth she didn't understand why such a punishment. The princess tried to remember the purple eyes and white hair. After meeting such a person, it is impossible to forget. The blue blade wondered why she didn't recognize him. The girl knew his name was Elania, but she didn't remember who he belonged to. Luana's biological mother, a maid of the royal palace who was lucky enough to win the king's favor. But her luck ran out when she gave birth to a child and died. The king sent the newborn princess to an abandoned palace. The maids, finding themselves in poverty, fled in all directions, and the only thing Luana had left was her maid, who even while in prison asked how the princess lived in the kingdom. She would till the land in the ruined garden, sew on commission, buy food and cook. It was a poor life, but the princess experienced no inconvenience. Convenient, but one day, the girl said that a simple opportunity to cook would be enough for her. The maid didn't teach her anything. She already knew how to do everything. She prepared many unusual dishes. Growing up, witches were always different from ordinary people. The Duke knew this before, but most importantly, that man, if he were a simple person, could not just disappear. At that moment, if this girl hadn't stopped him, the Duke wouldn't have let the stranger go. This was the most irresponsible thing possible. After all, he called the girl his man and is responsible for her. She is a witch. Her family cursed the Ligon family and forced them to choke on food. Most likely, the princess pretended to be stupid to gain trust. When the old man approached him and told him that dinner was ready, the knight simply kicked him out. The lady tasted what Wei prepared and said it was very tasty and that he did a great job. If you think about it that way, Legion should also eat well. He said he couldn't eat anything other than the girl's food. The girl realized that for some reason, she was worried that he had locked her in this room. Whether he is hungry or not is no longer the princess's problem. The blonde shouted to the whole room that, in her opinion, the Duke had a terrible character, calling him completely paranoid. The door opened, and the butler came out from inside, looking nervously at the princess. According to the old man, the Duke is not letting the blonde go, but is telling her to move to another place. She was moving for the first time and asked to collect her things. It was very strange, and for some reason she had a bad feeling. The princess asked if it was possible that the place she was moving to was a basement. The old man apologized to Lady Luana because it didn't seem like it to her, and they were going to prison. All this is because he probably understood her actions at the market. Last time, everything was resolved somehow, but now everything is different. The lady wanted to speak sincerely, but Legion didn't listen to her. She even started thinking about running away, but Sebastian was only asked if he had brought the girl. To this, she looked over the butler's shoulder and declared that she was here. The princess thought that if she escaped now, the misunderstanding would only intensify. Legion would have confidence in his heating due to the fact that they weren't actually talking. They had to meet face to face. If she fails, she might be locked in a cell or even tortured to death. The man took Luana's hand and told her to sit on a chair and tell him everything she knew. He concluded that information about other witches should have been extracted from the beginning, and it seems the man lost weight during the time they didn't see her. Thinking that this was her chance, the blonde loudly asked to hear her first. Tears began to tremble on her eyelashes when the girl asked why the knight had lost so much weight. The Duke stated that he would torture her even if she said nothing. It is known that witches are especially concerned about their relatives, which means this will help catch them. Sebastian tried to convince the Duke to do this, but only kicked the old man out of the basement. The brunette concluded that this girl dared to lead him by the nose, and now here she reflects care and understanding on her vile face. The woman nearby asked if she could start the torture. She said to simply lock up the princess, because she had urgent matters to attend to. He turned his gaze away from the girl and asked her not to do anything until he ordered. The butler asked what urgent matter was being dealt with, but the brunette simply asked to call a doctor. The knights gossiped no worse than the princesses, saying that no matter how powerful he was, it was impossible to find something that didn't exist. But one of them insisted that this was true, because he heard it from people who work on the Duke's estate. The same stranger with violet eyes heard what they were saying. The young witch was captured and hanged to be interrogated in a dungeon. But suddenly, the young lady from the bar slammed her fist on the table, asking him to stop making noise, because the boys were scaring the customers. A violet haze appeared between the boys when one of them said that witches don't exist. It was very cold behind the bars, and if the girl had known, she would have dressed warmer. At that moment, something flashed across Lijun's face. He looked lost and worried. While the girl was thinking about this, suddenly all the lights went out. Someone touched her hand and asked her to calm down, lighting a small candle to check on her. Instead of the stranger, there was a butler with a match in his hand. He smiled sweetly and said that it was him. The old man brought her some food, because the lady hadn't eaten anything since last night. He served her cream soup with croutons and a croissant from the chef. The princess was worried that the two of them might get into trouble because of this. But Sebastian calmed the girl. The lady took the plate and started eating, showing her gratitude to the butler for the food. The man smiled, patted her on the head, and then asked why Luana hadn't run away. To be honest, the disastrous outcome was predictable, and the old man asked if the girl really hadn't thought of escaping. For example, when the lady was changing clothes and he was waiting outside, or when they walked down an empty corridor together. It was all true, but if the witch had escaped, Legion would have been convinced of his suspicions about her. She understood that everything could end badly, because the master witnessed a suspicious scene. But this, however, is a misunderstanding, so the lady is sure that they just needed to talk. And for this, it was worth meeting face to face. And the princess didn't think that he would immediately want to torture her, because this was too much. The old man asked what that suspicious scene was, and if it was about what happened at the market. But the girl was not going to hide anything, because in reality nothing serious had happened. The man did not understand the words, that the witch's curses do not match. The chief physician of the palace stated that it became known while they were away. If a lineage has already been cursed, other witches will no longer be able to curse it. In this case, the brunette asked what kind of palpitations those were, if not a curse, or an illness, but the truth is that this symptom is common in young people. Many get scared when they encounter it, but over time it goes away on its own. However, at such times, it is important to listen to the call of the heart. They knocked on the door, and a man appeared to the Duke and asked if he could meet the supposed witch. He saw no reason to refuse, because he was going to show her to the old man anyway. As expected, the conversation turned out better than torture, to which the Duke asked if the witch had told him about the situation at the market. In general, the lady said that she was very happy that day that she and Legion went out somewhere. because it was the first time they went out on the street. And besides, grocery shopping with him turned out to be fun, and the abundance of new ingredients also cheered them up. In a word, everything was so good that she didn't want to darken the day with bloodshed, because then Legion might not want to go out at all. That's why the blonde stopped him when he tried to kill the stranger. Finally, the princess simply asked for more, which the butler also conveyed to the duke. The brunette realized that the lady simply did not want to lose the joint walks with him. His Majesty asked if the girl needed anything else besides the supplement. More food was brought to the girl, and she was seated at the table, and the maid asked if she wanted anything else. It was very strange, but not even the local servants could answer the question of why they were feeding the captive. The lady did not understand what was happening. She was definitely taken to the dungeon to be tortured, having decided that she must eat first, and then think about everything. After eating, it occurred to the girl that this might be her last meal. They were about to be tortured, and suddenly, so many luxurious dishes were brought. And most likely it was a question dedicated to the last will. The princess was worried because her time had come, and the denouement was approaching. There were so many things she didn't have time to prepare. For example, the pasta for the kimchi soup, the soup itself, that spicy flavor of the broth, complemented by melt-in-your-mouth kimchi, in contrast to the tough meat. Simply a spoon, and with snow-white rice and an egg roll. And if you cook it longer, you get a thick soup. With a side of rice, it is simply a delight. The lady began to write testaments dedicated to Wei, to which the maid said that if she was finished, she would leave. I wondered how much time had passed. It seemed that the princess had even managed to recover. The witch suddenly decided to ask when the execution would take place. The maid was very surprised by this question, because apart from providing her with comforts and food, she received no further instructions. The doctor stated that the duke was completely healthy and had no abnormalities. Maximum recommendations for normalizing nutrition. Then, the old man offered her a special recipe he had given before. But suddenly, Lijian suffered that strange attack again and remembered the words that at such moments it is important to listen to the call of the heart. The man clenched his fist and realized that in his heart there was nothing but hatred for witches. The former duke, Lijian's father, died very young due to a curse, and his foreign mother abandoned the duchy. And the boy was left completely alone. The weight of responsibility placed on his shoulders almost crushed him, but he knew how to put aside his emotions and persevere, accepting his new role as duke. First parents, then the ability to feel tastes, and in fact to feel in general. Witches did nothing but take everything from him. But Luana took nothing from the man. On the contrary, after her appearance, things got better. His Majesty even wondered if she was really a witch. The doctor burst into the office, announcing that he had just arrived. What happened to the man, the princess had already had before. She asked if he was really a man of Lijian. The man burned with surprise and rage, because it was this doctor who had been examining him for a week. But it was impossible. The old man said he was out on business and had only just arrived at the duke's first call. Instantly, the stranger changed his appearance and showed himself smiling at the girl. His Majesty immediately rushed to the dungeon, and the doctor tried to stop him, asking him not to walk alone because it could be dangerous. It was as if his heart had already jumped out of his chest when the brunette froze upon seeing that man from the market next to Luana. He said that the lady had not yet gone too far, so he was willing to forgive this escape. The brunette said that she would even reward the cook for luring a real wizard here. Legion drew his sword, when suddenly the stranger began to cast a spell and make some kind of magic ball in his hands. The entire room was surrounded by currents of purple smoke, and the man brought a rag to the witch's face, telling her not to inhale it. It seems this smoke is mixed with poison, but it won't work on the duke like any poison. But it was not poison at all, but the magic of a stranger. So slowly the duke began to lose consciousness and to sweat. The silhouette dressed in the robe put his arm around the lady's shoulder, saying it was time for them to leave. The girl began to worry about what would happen to her master, but he wiped the blood from his pale lips and declared that no one would leave here. He bit his hand to break free from the spell. The stranger is sure. He inhaled the magic dust. Despite the threats, the duke could barely stand, but his willpower was terrifying. The witch noticed that Lijian was bleeding. If they ran, then in this state he wouldn't be able to catch them. But to be honest, Luana really didn't want to run away with this guy because he was too strange. The girl would not only have to trust someone whose name she still doesn't know, but from now on, she would also have to hide from the pursuit of the embittered duke. Moreover, Lijian will continue to suffer due to the curse. On the other hand, if she escapes with this man, she may find out more about witches. Perhaps he will even tell her why Lijian can taste the princess's food, although he is deprived of this opportunity due to the curse. The princess realized that this was her chance to find out everything, so, getting a little ahead, she declared that she would definitely come back. She said she would definitely come back to him, so don't be too offended and wait. Suddenly, the duke began to fall, but the wizard calmed the girl by telling her that he had simply fallen asleep. The violet-eyed man realized that the brunette could become a serious obstacle. While he was alone, without knights, the man wanted to finish him off right there, but the lady only asked him to leave quickly. She said that time was running out, but the stranger wondered if she stopped him because she needed to run, or if she understood everything and was protecting his majesty. The lights turned on, and the knights began to remember Madame Luana and His Majesty the Duke. Leaving the palace, the blonde concluded that it seemed like they weren't even being chased. But this was obvious, because the owner was unconscious and they didn't have time for them. The princess was still worried about Lijian and asked if there would be consequences for the dust that causes the smoke. But the man had already said that he had just fallen asleep, that he would wake up and be as good as new. Finally, he introduced himself and stated that he was a wizard named Cole and that he only made high-quality compounds. The Duke would have no complications, he promised. This means that his name was Cole, and he is a real wizard. So the girl asked if all this time it was potions, not powders, although it looked more like powder. Cole said that every male or female wizard has their own specialization, and depending on it, each one has a nickname. The wizard suggested talking inside the house, which was located among the trees. Upon entering the house, the lady was surprised, because outside the place was much smaller. And this was one of the abilities of the Space Witch. In that case, the wizard asked if Lady Luana wanted to know what her mother could do. She really wanted to know, but she was more interested in who put the curse on Legion. The long-haired man bowed and asked why the witch was so worried about this man. But the lady thought it was sad. He cannot eat anything without disgust. She thinks that's why all his traits repel the people around him. But Cole believed that he deserved it, because he simply inherited the curse from his ancestor. But the man smiled and said that there might be a connection between the sin of parents and that of their descendants. The girl said that even if there is one, Lijian has already suffered enough, and that it's time to at least relax the curse. He was surprised by the princess's kindness and handed her Alana's diary. The blonde asked where he got her mother's diary from. The blonde decided that the lady had the right to know that Elenia was the witch who cursed the duke's family. The lady was surprised that her mother cursed Lijian, but nothing matched at all, for example her age, because how could she cast a curse several generations before Lijian? But the life of a witch is much longer than that of a person, and it turns out that Luana simply does not know Elenia's true age. It was disgusting to realize that the duke was right, so he locked the girl in prison, and he was going to torture her absolutely deservedly. So the blonde began to ask if there was any way to lift the curse. Maybe there was some special witch condition that would make the spell disappear. But the man said that only the one who cast this curse knows this condition. The wizard said that he only knew who cast the curse and not how to remove it, thus deceiving the girl. Everything was useless, so the blonde didn't understand how she would return to the duke now. The long-haired man said that witches, of course, are not a gift, but they do not curse because they have nothing to do. It was worth looking at her mother's diary. Perhaps the girl will find what she is looking for there. The princess asked if the man knew anything and then if he could tell her. But Elenia's diary could only be read by her descendants. It seemed the blonde had no choice but to simply read the diary. After a while, the princess concluded that they were trying to deceive her. This diary only said that her mother tried various dishes, such as wild boar meat. And Luana read it all night, but there were only recipes. She thought Cole knew something after all, but why would he lie to the younger witch? But since she read all night, it means there was something more interesting in this diary. The apple didn't fall far from the tree, and the girl and her mother had the same interests. Judging by how much Luana liked her mother's recipes, Elenia was a dish witch. She had no equal in the kitchen. By the way, the man found a second diary, which angered the lady, because he could have returned it immediately. But he didn't understand what was written there, so he didn't recognize it immediately. And Cole can also be understood in this regard. The blonde asked not to disturb her, and went to second grade to read this diary. On the first page, it was said that Elenia bequeathed this diary to her descendants. She said that this happened in the north during her trip in search of recipes. She found a red-haired boy who was crying and asked what had happened to him. He said he couldn't make a bun. Looking at the young creation, the girl saw that he wanted to make potato bread. In appearance, the roll even looked beautiful and very appetizing, but it didn't taste very good. And the problem was in the dough. It was edible, not tasteless, so the boy started shouting that he couldn't even do that. He said that it seems the land now has a new owner, and that he will probably just raise taxes. If so, then the boy's mother was afraid that they would not survive this winter. And Patty was still growing. He needed to eat well, but no one cared about peasants like them. The boy heard that the new owner began to walk around the territory, which means he might pass by his family. So the boy decided to appease him with a small gift. But of course, for such a person, bread made from potatoes and flour is simply ridiculous. But the red-haired boy still wanted to help his parents somehow. The boy himself also thought it was stupid, because he couldn't do anything with just bread. The girl said that cooking is much more than expensive ingredients. So, Elenia was offered to prepare the most delicious bread in the world. The blonde said that she was not a cook at all, but something else. And it seems the boy understood everything simply by the words. So he decided to try again, to cook according to the kind girl's recipe. First, the boiled potatoes had to be mashed with a fork. Then add a little milk, flour, an egg, salt and sugar to taste and mix well. As soon as lumps form, you must add soft butter. Then pour in some beer for fermentation. And start kneading the dough. The finished dough must be left in a warm place to rise, and at the end of the first fermentation, the dough should be 3 times larger. Next, it is necessary to beat the dough and let it rise again. After the second fermentation, the dough should be sprinkled with flour and formed into balls so that the bread keeps its shape. You can score it with a knife. All that remained was to bake, and the fluffy potato bread was ready. They failed again, to which the red-haired boy concluded that he was hopeless. Despite the witch's help, he was still mediocre. The lady asked him not to be angry, because this was only the second attempt. The girl said that the boy still has time to learn to cook. She smiled and said there was still plenty of time before the round. So she started forcing the boy to make the dough over and over again until it was perfect. Finally, everything was done in such a way that Elenia herself called it delicious. The red-haired boy bowed and thanked the girl for helping him with everything, because without her participation, he would never have helped his parents. She bent down and patted the boy on the head, telling him there was no need to thank. After all, cooking is not just a skill or expensive ingredients. If you don't put your soul into it, nothing will turn out well. The Duke began his round, calling this place a dirty backwater. The guy tried to push through the crowd to give the man his potato bread. And Patty cooked for the new landlord for the sake of her beloved parents. And even if this food, prepared by an ordinary peasant, is to someone's liking, then the kitchen in which so much effort has been invested is priceless. But when the man saw the bread, he threw it on the ground and got angry, saying he wouldn't eat this misery. He shouted that even this bread looked disgusting, making the boy cry. His parents began to apologize to the Duke, explaining that their son was still a child, and he didn't know what he was doing, which forced the boy not to stand still, but to apologize. But suddenly, the witch declared that this baby had nothing to apologize for, saying it in a monotonous and calm voice. The lady said that judging the taste without even trying it is ignorance, and then said that apparently the taste of ordinary food was alien to his tongue. And in this case, he and his family would have no taste for the rest of their days. The wizard assumed that the lady never found the answers she needed in the diaries. Elenia really cursed the entire Duke's family, and the girl, on the contrary, became convinced of what she did not want to believe. The man said that in 3 days there will be a witch's night, and Luana should decide whether she wants to participate. The thing is that once every 5 years, a special meeting of witches is held, a kind of initiation. There, young witches turn into real witches. Legion had large dark bruises under his eyes when he woke up in the morning. The man remembered how the witch in the dungeon said she was cold and scared, to which he ordered more torches to be placed. So the girl couldn't understand, and neither could the Duke himself, why he cared about her. Perhaps she is not a witch at all, but simply a good cook, and her witch mark is just a burn scar. He imagined the lady laughing, and saying that he was a fool because he was happy to be deceived. Her mother married for convenience, and as soon as her husband died, she immediately abandoned the child, leaving him in charge of the curse. And she also left towards sunset, taking all the money, so the Duke should take off his rose-colored glasses and face the truth. He dedicated his whole life to searching for witches, torturing and killing them, so it's worth knowing that they are all deceitful creatures. And this princess is no different from other witches in her deceit and meanness. The man woke up abruptly, sweating cold, and told his butler that he had a nightmare. The old man also said that everything was ready, handing him a paper. Before leaving, Luana said she would come back, but the brunette didn't believe her at all. She ordered a search to be initiated, and a reward twice the average to be assigned. Sebastian told the boss that they were looking for the witch. He said that even if Luana returned, he was not sure that everything would be the same. The gentleman began to skip meals again. If her return was delayed, anything could happen. The old man respected the feelings and sincere respect for the girl, but he would still have to take extreme measures. Simply put, the witch's night is an initiation ceremony. After undergoing the initiation, young witches acquire powers, and they gain the ability to cast and remove curses, and they also receive unique nicknames. Cole explained that with nicknames like Potion Witch, Space Witch, etc., the lady would probably receive the same nickname as Anya, since they are of the same blood. As the girl remembers, she was a food witch. If she becomes a full-fledged witch, she will be able to use all the recipes of real witches. That ceremony will take place in 2 days and is only held once every 5 years. This meant that if the blonde didn't make up her mind in these 3 days, she would have to wait at least 5 years until the next ceremony. The witch said she could think about it calmly. For witches who live longer than ordinary people, 5 years will fly by in the blink of an eye. And closing of the eyes. 3 days later, the girl has still not made up her decision. All this time, the witch wanted to convince Legion, but in the end she was right. And there is no other way to lift the curse than to become a full-fledged witch. Everything was too complicated for a girl who just wanted to cook for fun. In the book, the blue-eyed girl saw a recipe for meatloaf that she prepared twice. It says here that the recipe had that special magic to maintain the temperature and be able to fry the roll perfectly. It turns out that with magic, the girl will be able to cook even better. Luana wanted to see the expression on Lijan's face when he started cooking even more deliciously than now. After the lady arrived at that place, Lijan, his knights, Wei, and everyone who looked at the girl with disbelief, including the servants on this list, all happily ate the food she had prepared, and they said that these dishes are delicious. The blonde wanted to return, to hear praise again, to see happy faces, to cook in this new world. That is more than one room, and also to fulfill the promise the witch made to his grace the Duke. But if she becomes a full-fledged witch, most likely they will not treat her the same way as before. People wondered what the cook witch had done to make people look for her. Maybe she is just a stupid aristocrat who ran away from home. And that's nothing unusual. Cole declared that by becoming a real witch, the lady could cast magic. Her life expectancy would increase, and she would also meet many powerful witches. It is great news to see them all in a new light, as the wizard said, because their realities are a little different from human ones. Cole's words don't seem very attractive to the girl. Life expectancy is nonsense, because then Luana's human choice will die long before her. For example, and having gotten used to magic, the blonde will never fit in with the circle of people who do not use it. It's a little different. It's a completely different life indeed. Most of all, the lady feared that, having inherited Lana's power, she would also inherit her hatred for the Lijan family. She didn't know what to do, because maybe that's why Cole was rewarding her. Suddenly, someone knocked on the room and asked if Miss Luana could come for a minute. She realized that the wizard was disguised, or that was the usual attire for the witch's night. Time was running out, and if the girl was going to participate, she needed to go quickly. So the man asked if the lady had already decided, but she had nothing to lose. So it was better to ask directly why Cole wanted Luana to participate in the witch's night. If you think about it, they barely know each other, and the wizard is not obliged to do all this. The man said that he owes it to the girl's mother, because he is the only wizard in the world of witches. If a boy is born, he will most likely die in infancy, because men's bodies are not compatible with witches' magic. Even if the boy survives, he will not be able to become a good wizard. The differences in abilities are too great. Because of this, a man with witchcraft powers is often considered an outcast. Elenia was completely different. She personally wanted to be friends with him and was interested in male witchcraft. He told her that he made a potion that compensates for the lack of magic. It is made from herbs that can contain magical power, so it was not actually witchcraft. He even asked to try a little, because he liked the color, even though the potion might turn out bitter. Moreover, the girl announced that she did not demand that he give it to her for free, for in return she could show him what she could do. Cole gave her the potion, thinking that this was the first time a witch of her age had spoken to him. It was created from medicinal herbs, so it was very bitter. The man said that Elenia became his first and only friend. He also showed a gift that the woman, even before her death, left him as a sign of friendship. Elenia was also human, but when she found out she was descended from a witch, she was delighted and followed in her footsteps. The lady really liked the fact that she could diversify food with the help of magic. The woman was sincerely happy to have been lucky enough to become a witch. Therefore, Cole hoped that his daughter would also find happiness by becoming a witch, and he was truly sincere and only wished the girl the best. It seems that a grand cooking competition is starting in the duchy, and everyone is surprised by the Duke's obsession with finding a chef. But the requirements were also quite specific, because only young girls could participate. And healthy. There were even rumors that this competition was just a cover to select a bride. But it was very possible that they simply needed a cook there. A girl decided to apply without having any cooking knowledge, hire someone, and pretend that she was cooking the dishes. Her plans included establishing connections with the Duke to be able to take advantage of this in the future. The Emperor found out that his Duke was planning something big. He even sent her a personal invitation that she could not ignore. The Empress hugged him from behind and told him she would go with him, because she didn't want to be separated for a minute. The old man's last resort was to use the cooking competition to find a new love for His Majesty. It is true that the Duke opened up only to Luana, but love may have nothing to do with it. There was simply something special about a witch's cooking, and the chef believed she was irreplaceable. The man was angry with his butler because he dared to do all this behind his back. He didn't understand why the old man didn't understand, because he was cursed and only the blonde could somehow prevent it. The brunette felt dizzy and told Sebastian not to waste his budget on such nonsense, and to go and cancel everything immediately. The butler lowered his head and whispered that the Duke personally approved of this. He passed the decree to the knight to sign while suffering from a hangover. The method was, of course, vile, but the old man did everything for the sake of His Majesty. The butler said that it was written there with a pen and could not be cut. Even if he was crazy, they could only hold this competition as soon as possible. Lijon's condition worsens day by day. If he continues to refuse to eat, it will only get worse. If not even the chef, whom they call a genius, can prepare edible food for the master, then there is no point in hiring a new person. A maid entered the room with a variety of dishes and announced that all these dishes had been pre-selected with excellent reviews. The old man said that if, after trying this, His Highness is still not satisfied, then he would give up, take responsibility, and pay the damages. So, the man decided that it was his mistake, and he would accept this food as punishment for his own negligence. The brunette did not like it at all, and the butler began to think that it was still impossible to beat the curse. Red eyes, he said that the old man was right, because it was definitely not himself when he signed his consent for the culinary competition. He is not the one to dare to do such a crazy thing, and the butler either. He is too old for that. Suddenly, after trying another mushroom soup, the man felt its taste. The man also received dishes from the second round. The butler pointed to a dish prepared by the author of that mushroom soup that tasted good. He asked if Sebastian himself had tried it and what he would say. The theme of the second round was meat dishes, so most cooked steaks. And although there were many other outstanding dishes, there was nothing as extraordinary as this one. The cook used very specific seasonings, and the butler asked if Legion liked it. There could be no mistake, and His Majesty definitely tasted the food as it was. The man said that he wanted to meet the participant who prepared this dish, but that they would still meet soon, no matter what. The thing is that this participant will perform in the final tomorrow. The final round of the competition began. This time, there were no restrictions on the theme, and the participants had 2 hours to do their best, using any recipe, even their own, to create a dish that reveals the full depth of the chef's talent. The presenter announced that today the judges will be Mr. Butler Sebastian, Chef Dewey, as well as the Duke himself and a special guest, His Majesty the Emperor. The blonde asked the Duke if anyone's food was to his liking, but the man asked early not to speak until he tried it. The emperor said he had heard rumors that this was a show disguised as a competition, and that he could not miss it. He asked to look at the girl, who was preparing some kind of wonder. She chose lobsters, rarely seen in the empire, and this is a very unusual choice. And melt butter in a hot pan, add onions, herb cream, white wine and seafood stock, and some kind of golden seasoning, probably a secret ingredient. Cleaned lobster meat, covered with an unusual sauce, is placed back into the shell, and then it is baked. 1 minute before the dish is ready, the participant sprinkles the dish with parsley and parmesan. Participant Rio prepared lobster thermidor and said that for those who don't have enough sauce, she can serve it separately. The butler said that lobsters were a good move because he didn't know they were prepared differently. Besides boiling, a very mild but spicy taste. The chef also expressed his opinion, saying that classic lobster thermidor with powdered mustard is not bad. Here the most difficult thing is to choose the right fire in the oven and prepare the sauce itself. That's why the girl did a good job. The emperor said that if she didn't win, he would gladly take the girl to the imperial palace for her good work. The presenter shouted that most judges responded positively, and the last judge was given the floor. Mr. Duke. The brunette said it was edible, although he didn't taste anything, which was considered the highest praise from the Duke. These words from His Majesty, the Duke himself, mean that the dish was a success, and his opponents will have to sweat. One of the participants was a blue-eyed blonde who said her dish was simple, and it didn't require much time. The presenter asked for the recipe to make it, to which the blue leaf said that now she would tell everything. The chicken is soaked in milk to remove the smell and then seasoned with pepper, salt and garlic. It is double-dipped in rice flour and starch, and then fried in boiling oil. To serve, a special sauce is used, which she created from popular seasonings in her homeland. Finally, the young cook finished, sharing the recipe for spicy sauce fried chicken. The butler was surprised that it was ordinary chicken meat. He did not expect such a taste from rather simple ingredients. Each piece looked very appetizing, and there was no excess fat, which usually remains when frying in oil. The emperor tasted it and was surprised by its wonderful and unusual taste, and then asked for more. The presenter said that they have a new contender with positive reviews and asked what Lijan thought about it. He got up from his seat and approached the girl so closely that she even got embarrassed. Mr. Duke declared that by the power vested in him, he appoints this young cook as his from this moment on. It was too hasty an announcement because no one even tasted the rest of the dishes, but even the emperor himself congratulated the new winner. The blonde said that if Lijan was really grateful to him, then he should visit the palace more often, and also bring his new cook. The man ordered the winner to follow him because he needed to draw up a contract with her. The girl obediently followed him, trying to tell him something. The brunette stated that he hated these excuses and named the winner Luana. The girl understood nothing when she said her name was Maria, but the Duke asked her to stop pretending. His Majesty stated that he easily recognized the taste of her food. Luana seasoned the soup with the same sauce as the meat. At least it was worth trying to do something different. The dishes prepared by the witch exuded the same aroma as the sauce that Wei carefully keeps in jars. Besides, she recently told the Duke that she thought she saw someone near them. The man asked what was wrong with her face, because he thought she was trying to deceive him by hiding her appearance. Tears streamed down his cheeks when Lijan declared that the princess had abandoned him, and along with the witches, he wanted to kill the man. Hearing this, Luana sharply pushed the brunette away from her. The emperor asked if the girl had anything to do with the Duke, because he was interested in his trip. Ingrid said not at all, because she only wanted to meet her sister. She thought she saw her in the kitchen, but she didn't find the girl. The blonde said that she was locked up in the imperial palace. She shouldn't have even found out the news. The girl shouted at the Duke, who was still surprised by her behavior, that he himself had put her on the wanted list. She said she had already said that sooner or later she would return, and she will also find a way to lift the curse, because she promised that she would definitely return. The witch said that she was very worried, which is why she became a full-fledged witch. Because Cole disliked the man, she even ran away from him. But when the blonde spoke to people, the first thing she saw was his face on a wanted poster, and everywhere they talked about choosing a new chef. His Majesty took the girl by the shoulder when she told him that she was simply obliged to speak with him face to face. But the Duke was more concerned about the fact that the lady betrayed her relative to be able to return to him. But this was not exactly a betrayal. Each simply followed their own path. The man went through his memories, where his father said that his death was the work of a witch, as well as the fact that his mother abandoned him because they are all lying creatures. Liars, the Duke was furiously surprised that the girl ran away from Cole because she disliked him. He realized that she had gone so far to fulfill her promise. The blonde felt how angry he was and thought she had gone too far with her emotions. Moreover, the brunette was worried about the information the girl gave, as she said that she had gone through the process of becoming a full-fledged witch. Previously, the girl was only at one stage, but now, after the initiation ceremony, she has become a full-fledged witch. His Majesty himself assumed that now the witch could lift the curse from him. To be honest, even with the change of appearance, other witches helped her, and the man asked her why she had returned to the mansion. The Duke said that she had already crawled back, even though he hadn't even found a way to help her, and she thought she could come and go whenever she wanted. The girl replied that she couldn't help returning, knowing that he couldn't eat anything except what she cooked. Now she can also cook more varied dishes, thanks to her witch skills, to which the red-eyed man became embarrassed upon realizing that the girl was worried about him. By the way, the blonde asked the Duke to choose Rio and talk to her. If it weren't for her, he would have easily won. Even Lord Lelan acknowledged her dish. But His Majesty didn't understand why he needed a new cook when the princess returned. The witch immediately declared that she couldn't cook for him forever. In any case, we must think about the future, when the curse is lifted. The brunette asked why the lady couldn't cook food for him forever. The blue-eyed girl understood that it was obvious, but he really didn't understand. Offended, the man called it nonsense and realized that the girl wanted to give the prize to that participant. There's nothing to be done about it, as it is the princess's decision. However, His Majesty the Lord has a countercondition. The cook's helpers shouted that they were very happy that Miss Luana was back. They began to praise her, saying that everyone was astonished that the princess left without saying a word. Some even thought that the blonde studied abroad and tried many extravagant dishes. The Duke came up with the legend that Maria was forced to return to her homeland for personal reasons, and Luana went abroad to improve her culinary skills. After having studied with the best masters, she returned alone. On the other hand, the ceremony of a witch's escape and initiation sounds much more ridiculous. In the carriage, the man asked the girl to behave more relaxed in public. Even if she tried, the condition of a man is to behave like lovers. It was rumored that this cooking competition was a secret showdown. They were using it so that he could watch her and the princess wouldn't run away again. He wanted everyone to think they were in a relationship, so no one would be surprised that they were together all the time. His Majesty himself said that he doesn't care what others think. So why did this circus really want to teach her a lesson? But if she doesn't like something, quickly find a way to lift the curse. The blonde wanted to tell the knight about that method, but he interrupted her by asking her to call him by his name. Rumors about a relationship with her could ruin Lijan's reputation, because to everyone around her, the princess is a commoner. No one knows the truth about her origins. The blonde said that there was probably a better way, and suggested that they return to the mansion and decide. The brunette asked, in general, who cares about this witch's origin? Besides, this is a temporary measure, but apparently it is too difficult for the lady not only to date, but even to call him by his name, as her agreement may be a burden to her. So the Duke asked if the lady really had someone she liked. To the answer that there was no one, and that no, the Duke saw no problem. It's useless, no matter what the witch says, he won't listen to her. The man did not say that the princess's fears were useless. He simply didn't care much about gossip, which could result in ridicule for the blonde. He assumes it himself. That's why, when he arrived at a clothing store, the man told her to choose whatever she wanted. Red-Eyed explained that one must choose the attire, the more expensive and higher quality. Better, His Majesty leaned close to the lady's ear and whispered that her clothes reflected his love for her, which is why they should be expensive. Secular society loves to savor such gestures, but for the girl it was too close. The witch never bought dresses for herself. Even when she lived in the palace, her nanny sewed her clothes. She had no idea what to choose. The blue-eyed girl thought she couldn't understand which of these dresses was the most luxurious, because to her all of them looked expensive. The gentleman thought that the girl didn't like anything, but simply didn't know how to choose. A woman who was advising visitors asked to follow her. She said that the lady had light eyes and hair, so pastel colors would suit her best. Dresses with puff sleeves and a square neckline were fashionable now. The woman said that she would help her choose one that was also comfortable for her to move in. After all, the Duke especially values freedom of movement, and in general. The clothes she wore in the mansion were also beautiful, but a little uncomfortable. Seeing the girl in a new pink outfit, the man said that the lady was very lucky. Suddenly, the blonde noticed the famous desserts. Wei praised them the most. Lijian was indifferent to sweets, but next to the lady, everything became much sweeter. The princess was surprised when the brunette brought a piece of dessert to the girl's lips. The news of this spread throughout the empire. The witch was too embarrassed to look at her fake lover now. But the dessert is incredibly tasty, and Legion's gaze has become much warmer since their first meeting. When the Duke realized that the girl liked the dessert, he asked for more and called the waiter. The girl asked if the man was hungry, even though they had breakfast a couple of hours ago. He said he wasn't hungry at all, but his face said the opposite. The lady said there was a picturesque place nearby. For example, near the riverbank, a beautiful view opens up. Simply, a man wanted to take a walk there after eating. The girl said she had brought some food, and they could eat there. In general, the Duke thought the witch had prepared some food. To this, the princess said that if you cook it in the morning and bring it with you, it won't taste as good. She already prepared the ingredients. All that remains is to mix. The knight asked how it was possible to refuse a date so much, but prepare for the fact that she might be hungry. This was the witch's direct responsibility. But they still had a lot to do. The girl thought she wanted to add more different seasonings, but it's okay. She planned to fill the pot 2/3 full with water and mix the pasta sauce, soy sauce and sugar. Pour this into the vegetable mixture prepared yesterday, and cook this too until the water boils. The princess announced that the dish was sausages made with rice flour. Lijian reported that it looked like soaked paper, but it was yumuk, something like seafood cutlets, but fried in thin layers instead of flat cakes. This texture seemed to be something between meat and bread, and this, as the man called paper. It is soft and pleasant. Apparently, it was well marinated in the sauce. The spicy iamuk pairs well with the mild tteokbokki. Even the cabbage he knows tastes completely different, and if it gets spicy, a sip of the sanitary juice instantly fixes it. The girl suggested dipping the snacks in the sauce because it would taste better. Moreover, the witch asked to thank Rio when they returned, because if it weren't for her help with the seafood, Luana wouldn't have been able to prepare this dish. The blue-eyed girl said that cooking alone is even much more difficult. Luana said that she just has to wait a little longer, and everything will definitely turn out well for her. So the brunette said he would wait impatiently. It turns out that the lady thought that a fake relationship was not so bad. At first it scared her, but an affectionate Lijian is definitely more pleasant to look at. But if he continues to behave this way, this could become a problem. Instantly, the blonde wondered if Mr. Lijian had fallen in love with her. This couldn't have happened, but the memories of how angry he got out of the blue during their conversation in the carriage, and his sudden desire to start a fake relationship. Certain suspicions arise. The blonde calmed down. She thinks that Lishan simply needs her very much, like a newly hatched duckling clinging to its mother. When he breaks the curse and can taste food again, he will immediately lose interest in Luana and, on the other hand, he will become interested in a real relationship and not a fake one. But suddenly, while the girl was thinking about this, the man decided not to waste time, and he took her hand and kissed her deeply. The witch pulled away from the kiss and realized that they were being watched. The man hugged her tighter and told her not to look because he had no idea who it was. But someone was watching them. The Duke wanted to deal with this with the help of a sword, but the girl stopped him, not understanding why he walked around with a sword everywhere. She said she didn't like bloodshed, that they were pretending to be lovers, and that maybe some busybody decided to check it out. It will be strange if a man runs after him, leaving the lady alone. They just won't understand it. She asked what would happen if he became some kind of sorcerer again, and what he would do then, because the sword might prove useless, like the last time at the market. Then the girl suggested going to the market, and in her opinion, it was a good idea. In such a crowded place, it is much easier to avoid surveillance. It's a shame to call, but His Majesty no longer felt the presence of surveillance. He said that since they were being watched, it was worth canceling all appointments. He already wanted to go home, but the princess asked Lijian to do some shopping, since they had already arrived. But if it's about food, then there's plenty in the palace. But the strawberries were all gone, because that strawberry cake at the restaurant was a shame that only she could taste. The brunette was surprised that the witch wanted to buy the ingredients and cook exactly the same at home. But nothing can be done, since the blonde wants it that way, and that is her most sincere wish. But in return, the Duke will follow the blue-eyed girl everywhere. It started raining heavily, but the carriage was very warm and cozy. Suddenly, the brunette called Luana and seriously asked if she liked it. Even though it was a date for show, they still have to pretend to be a couple for a long time. If the lady didn't like something, he should improve, so it will be easier if she gives him her opinion. The princess wondered if she should be frank. Instantly, Albert, the commander of the Imperial Guard, called the carriage. The Duke said that this was not how things were done, and expected a good reason to stop the carriage right in front of his house. The commander apologized for the inconvenience, but he had urgent matters. He stated that he had arrived by order of His Majesty, the Emperor. It turned out that the blonde demands that Mrs. Luana be handed over to him. The brunette couldn't quite understand why he needed his princess. The man said that the girl was very tired due to working on the mansion's affairs, that she had been doing all day, plus severe stress because someone was watching them. In this state, he will not allow her to be taken before the emperor, but he can deliver her to the palace personally. The commander of the Imperial Guard clearly explained that the emperor had issued a specific decree, and with all due respect, it would be better if the Duke came to the meeting. But the lady was sure that this was probably another whim of the emperor. Red Eyes whispered to the blonde not to do this, because he had a bad feeling about it. The lady thanked him for his concern, but believes that they are now facing a serious problem. Because if His Majesty disobeys his master's order, it will be perceived as rebellion, and they might even kill the Duke for it. The blonde said she wouldn't do anything wrong, so she kissed him on the forehead and smiled. She asked the brunette to go home because everything would be fine. The captain said that they were returning to the palace and needed to get ready. The man placed someone else's hand on his cheek and said he would be waiting for her. He didn't even understand what he had just done, but it wasn't even a kiss on the lips. And if he hadn't intervened, problems would have occurred. It was interesting because the emperor needed the princess. He was hungry at night, which is very possible. Suddenly, a stranger with a hood on his head and a huge sword on his back entered the carriage. He took her in his arms and told her that this was not the princess's kidnapping at all. So you have to be calm. Moreover, the men claimed that they would return the girl home and nothing more. Most likely, this was Luana's native empire, and then he recognized those green eyes. The stranger hugged the witch, telling her that he hoped she would do everything right and that she was really the same princess. Recently, the Duke was informed that there was no order from the emperor. Now everything has fallen into place. Someone has disguised himself as an imperial guard and will kidnap the princess. The blonde smiled sinisterly and said that Ingrid had also disappeared recently. The emperor ordered to suppress the rebellion and return Princess Ingrid first. The girl woke up in a strange place where someone was talking about her resistance. Rubbing her eyes, the lady was surprised to see her older sister in front of her. She pointed her finger at the man next to her and called him a kidnapper, to which he said that he was ill-mannered, because, in fact, he was of noble blood. Green Eyes asked to introduce himself, saying he was Cain, originally from the Duchy of Elan. His family was considered the second, after the imperial dynasty. Ingrid said that she arranged all this, and even secretly sent a person to warn her. The same man, sent by his sister, watched the princess and the Duke in the garden. The blonde apologized because she ran away from him, because she thought they were being followed. But this is a common misunderstanding. Everything happened too unexpectedly for Luana. She must have been scared. The girl said that everything turned out well for them, and that she was very happy that they finally reunited. She also said that there was no turning back, which resonated in the witch's head. But the man knew that the main character's sister would be against it, because while Miss Ingrid was desperately organizing the resistance, the girl was playing and mocking that cruel murderer. The Duke called the girl a traitor and added that she had adapted very well, to which the main character defended her sister. The blonde said the princess must be tired, but the witch suddenly asked if she was really gathering an army. The next morning, Luana couldn't even understand what she was doing next to the training men. Just the day before yesterday, the lady tried on exquisite outfits and enjoyed delicacies. Everything was wonderful. These memories could easily be considered embellished, but more than enthusiastic. Ingrid said that, with them, there were families who swore loyalty to the imperial family, and many other brave warriors. The girl called their direct descendant of royal blood, and they responded, and all this must happen for one goal, or rather for the rebirth of their empire. It didn't seem so to the girl. It turns out the novel is going downhill. First, the emperor and empress were immediately executed, which was not in the original. And then it turned out that Ingrid was not carried away by the legion. Luana understood that small changes could occur, but the resurgence of the empire was too much. In the novel, their empire was absorbed by the enemy without any obstacles, and Ingrid fell into the trap of a terrible relationship. Quite a grim development, but that's this novel. It was unpleasant from the start. Maybe this time Ingrid won't suffer so much. Anything is better than falling in love with a psychotic emperor who torments you. The only drawback is that the princess is not particularly interested in reviving her native empire. In the empire, to which there is no turning back, there remains a helpless and hungry bunny named Lichen. After tasting the food served by the cook, the girl was surprised by the unpleasant taste. The lady could calmly endure anything, except inedible dishes. The man decided to check what the noise in the kitchen was. It turned out to be Princess Luana, who decided to cook herself, and it turned out incredibly delicious. One of the knights suggested that he try it, to which he threw the dish on the floor. The Duke ordered not to forget, she may be a princess, but she has become too close to the enemy of her homeland. He claimed that he might have put something in the food, but the blonde replied that she wouldn't dare spoil the sacred food. After tasting it, the blonde was surprised, because they are definitely the same ingredients, but the taste is completely different. The cook agreed that Luana could use the kitchen if she wanted, but only under his supervision, because they still cannot trust the witch. In this case, if the man liked it, then the woman would like to order something else. She knocked on her sister's door, offering to eat a delicious meal together. Obviously, the princess was looking for an excuse, but they needed to talk in any case. The lady promised to change clothes and go to the backyard cabin. Moreover, Ingrid asked Kane to take Luana to her destination, to which the girl told him not to be late. Otherwise, everything would get cold, and it wouldn't be so tasty. The main character asked Cole, who was in her room, to approach the subject because she needed to leave. The witch was surprised that there was such a beautiful place in the backyard, but it seems the witch had already seen these flowers somewhere, but her flowers grew everywhere in her empire. Ingrid said that the climate of the invading empire did not suit them, but here, on the border, they could grow quite well. The girl was surprised that her sister arrived faster than expected. The blue-eyed girl said that the witch cooks very deliciously, and that she simply couldn't resist. While eating, the main character asked if Luana really wanted to return to captivity. The lady was surprised because he simply asked this without awkward pauses. Luana said that she felt like she didn't belong here. Ingrid didn't lead her to question her duty as a member of the imperial family, and realized that the girl didn't want anything to do with her empire. The princess admitted that she only wants to keep her little sister safe, and that, due to the plans, she might be in danger. And although it was rude, the blonde said that Lord Kane was partly right. She explained that he was right, only that Lijan was a very cruel person. She explained that the Duke would easily harm the girl, if necessary. Well, Lord and Luana's sister can also be sincerely understood. Luana concluded, because even she was threatened by this man more than once. But still, the witch cannot stay away from the Legion, because despite everything, he has good qualities. The sixth princess looked at her sister with an aggressive look and stated that she could not know anything for sure. The main character suddenly asked if those rumors that the two were lovers were true, but she immediately explained that they were just rumors, because they were not actually dating at all. The witch wanted to tell her why these rumors were created, but the girl interrupted her, thanking her for the food and hastily preparing to leave. Upon returning to her room, the lady asked Cole if they had talked about everything yet, but the wizard immediately announced that another important piece of news had appeared. It was that they urgently needed to change shelter. His desire to find the princesses was much stronger than he had imagined. The blue-eyed one wanted to immediately notify the soldiers, but the sorcerer stopped her by asking what she was talking about. And Luana, to which she replied that it seemed she wanted to return to the enemy empire. And that was it. The man pressed the main princess against the wall and ordered her to be stopped. This must be done, because otherwise, their agreement that they would not hand Luana over to the Duke in exchange for his help will be closed. The contract will be terminated, just like the promise to kill the emperor of the enemy empire. Those words spoken at dinner sounded as if Luana was justifying him, but she couldn't listen to them calmly. She simply sat there like someone who knows Legion a little. Naturally, she would be on his side. But suddenly, while the princess was thinking about this, a knight ran up to her and shouted that a problem had occurred. He reported that imperial bloodhounds were heading to their hideout, led by the most loyal of them. In fact, the girl was even a little glad that Legion was nearby. But unfortunately, the girl has no way to escape, and if she leaves a trace, she will put everyone in danger. The Duke's bloodhounds reported that there were no traces. They seemed to have disappeared. No matter how skilled they were, it was simply impossible to do such a thing. The Duke dismissed the theory that the missing people were using magic, saying they were somewhere nearby, giving the order to split up and comb the area. Entering the house, where the refugees had spent the night for some time, the man imagined Luana greeting him with new food on a tray. It was a shame that she had still run away, because he hoped that at least some clue would remain here. Lijian even began to doubt that his princess was really kidnapped, and that she herself had not run away from him. He wanted to believe her, but the situation was strange. Although the lady did not show any particular nostalgia, she still worried about her own sister. The man suggested that the girl could join her and use magic to throw off the trail. With a gust of wind, the Duke noticed an ash-colored hair. If he untied it, the length would also match Luana's hair. It was raining that day, so no tracks were left. The knight thought that the surveillance detachment had been spotted on the march to the shelter, so the refugees hurried to retreat. His Majesty clearly implied that if the knight was wrong, he could kill him. The Emperor explained this with the example that when a rosebud becomes useless, it must be cut off. If left, it will simply waste nutrients, and the flowering period will be shorter and not as beautiful and beneficial to the blooming organism. The man smiled maliciously and said that he thought he had cut everything well, but it seems he was too soft. The blonde said to focus on the strategy of reviving their empire, and that everything else could wait. Last time, Ingrid was happy with the usual flowers, and the gentleman just wanted to see her smile at least one more time. But she remained just as serious and grim. The girl remembered how the Emperor forced her to eat in front of him, saying that he began to regain his senses after his sister's arrival. She tried to be patient and behave decently because she needed his trust to achieve her goal. The blonde suggested that perhaps the lady didn't like the imperial food, smiling slyly, and the princess realized that she needed to think much more broadly. The girl could not hide her disgust, because this unpleasant man irritated her very much. The blonde composed herself and replied that she simply didn't feel well, that the nausea and cramps due to stress always tormented her. Her maid noticed that the captive was grim and quiet. It was understandable. Her entire family was executed, except for her sister. Suddenly, Ingrid asked the servant if she could ask him something. The blue-eyed girl opened her botany book and found the flowers that grew on the terrace during her lunch with the Emperor. The flowers were called ornamental Ophelia, an annual plant that grows in temperate climates. The local climate does not suit her, but in her empire it bloomed everywhere. In the language of flowers, it meant a new beginning or freedom, just as Luana said. The maid reported that the captive had barely read one page and immediately began to cry. The next morning, the Emperor did everything to make the girl's entire room bloom with this white rose. His Majesty decided that since the lady liked these flowers, then everything should be decorated with them. Everything was strange. These flowers do not even grow in the empire, but he simply took them and decorated everything with them. Moreover, the princess didn't say a word about these flowers last time, but he found out everything himself. Ingrid realized that this was a way to mock her, and once again, the Emperor decided to mock her. This person deliberately and gradually takes away everything the girl has. During dinner, the Emperor asked her if she liked the room decoration. The blonde thanked the man and asked how he knew that she liked it. She immediately blushed and said that for the first time Ingrid liked what he did for her. The princess considered this too much because she thought he just wanted to mock him, but his smile was quite sweet, like that of an innocent child. The girl wanted to leave abruptly, when suddenly she ran into a maid who fell and broke a vase of flowers. She started composing herself, apologizing because she was thinking about her own business. Because of her carelessness, the blonde scratched her finger on a piece of glass, but said it was fine because it was only a scratch. The red-haired maid immediately fell to her knees and started shouting and endlessly forgiving. When the captive woke up, she saw that the vase with flowers was no longer there. She wanted to ask where the flowers were, but she saw another maid. She said that the previous maid could no longer work, and that she was assigned to serve the princess in her place. His Majesty ordered that she be escorted to the garden for breakfast, and she would help the lady get ready. The thing is, it is at this time of day that roses shine especially brightly, because the morning dew has not yet dried. The man asked if these flowers were not beautiful, to which the girl replied that they were good, calling the emperor his majesty. And while she was thinking, he dragged her out of bed to show her the flowers. Ingrid couldn't stop thinking about the same maid from yesterday, wondering why she suddenly became disabled. The last thing the princess wanted to do was ask about it, but there was no other choice. She said that she now had a new maid and asked what had happened to the previous one. But the emperor was surprised that she was actually interested. The man said that he ordered her hands to be cut off and expelled her from the palace. Normally, in such a situation, he would have ordered the scoundrel's head to be cut off. But he was happy that the lady was delighted with his gifts, so he decided to limit himself to her hands. The blonde led the girl a little further into the garden and told her that he had prepared this greenhouse for her. A whole greenhouse with Ingrid's favorite flowers, and they do not grow anywhere else except in this place. He looked at the frightened princess and asked what she thought about this. The blonde thought that the emperor just wanted to stroke his vanity, knowing that his idea with the flowers was a success. And if something didn't go according to plan, like the appearance of scratches on his property, he immediately flew there. A rage, she realized that this man cared about nothing but himself. Think about it, Ingrid's homeland fell into the hands of such a nonentity. It was a shame to admit it, but the lady was no different from those flowers behind the glass. Anyone could pick them up and take them away, and when they got tired of them, they could throw them away. But living here and now, a girl can still take the opportunity and do something. Teardrops appeared on her cheeks, and the princess herself threw herself into her master's arms. And while she is still alive, there is unfinished business, so she began to pretend apologies to the emperor. She said that she dared to doubt the sincerity of the blonde's love, but now everything is completely different. If the emperor wants her to become a flower, she will happily play along, and will say that she realized how wrong she was, and that, in fact, the princess is in love with this cruel man. The man kissed the blue-eyed woman, telling her that he was also in love with her, but she thought she would burn to the ground everything she had for him. The wizard entered through the window, saying that the captive would not have called him like that for no reason. And he asked what had happened to her. She asked if his proposal regarding those same amulets was valid. The blonde told her to prepare everything she needed for tomorrow morning. The man asked if this was not too dangerous, and why the girl suddenly changed her mind. The blue-eyed girl explained that he did not say that she succumbed to the influence of others, but that she herself wanted to do exactly what this man suggested. At that moment, the sixth princess was cooking, but she asked the duke not to look like that, because she wasn't going to poison him. But the knight kept saying that he couldn't trust the blonde. She said that if the knight disliked it so much, then he could have someone else watch her. The girl stated that they met on the day of the kidnapping, and there was nothing so disappointing in his behavior. The gentleman said that she knows what they had to go through to assemble the squad. In the composition, the cook sees it in now. The girl didn't think it was difficult, but no more difficult than her current plans to restore the empire. The man said that even in moments of despair, Madame Ingrid constantly repeated the same thing. The princess said that if she gave up, she wouldn't be able to look Luana in the eye. After all, it was her words that helped her get this far. Suddenly, a knight burst into the kitchen, saying that Madame Ingrid was urgently looking for the gentleman. The blonde remembered that, indeed, her words about what she could do here, and now encouraged her sister to gather an army and revive the empire. So Ingrid was on edge. It was necessary to cheer her up somehow. The witch wondered if those words prompted the princess to take such actions. This whole mess is entirely Luana's fault. The girl thought and decided that she had to talk to Ingrid again. The duke looked at other people's hair and thought that this was the only clue he had found. He concluded that he needed to report this, but in such a situation, the knight ran up to him and shouted that he had to leave urgently. It so happened that the blonde dismounted the white horse and greeted his subordinate. The emperor felt suffocated in the palace and wanted glasses, so he expected the man to immediately start something similar to the last war. His Majesty declared that Ligon had completely disappointed him. He said that he wasn't insightful enough because he lacked skills. Red Eyes ordered the soldiers to gather, because from now on, he would personally lead the pursuit. Ligon asked what the emperor was talking about, to which he replied that he wanted to capture Ingrid. And moreover, he plans to get rid of everyone else completely. He forbade taking prisoners, because this mercy would only bring trouble. Seeing the worried look, the man smiled and was surprised that he was worried about that witch. Suddenly, someone started making noise behind the tent, and the duke went out to ask. to which the knight replied that he had stolen his girlfriend. The two boys fought, shouting that he couldn't do that, rushing at him with a sword. Everything started after the patrols. They seem to lose their minds in that forest and attack everyone they meet. The soldiers are behaving strangely, so panic may start. And this mainly happens in the eastern part of the forest. Absolutely all refugees, and the patrol noticed that a devilish fog had appeared. The girl was told that Ingrid was walking nearby. She went to look for her and got lost in the forest. The blonde had no idea which path to take to get back to her boys. Hearing someone else's voice, the lady decided to boil it, seeing coal among the bushes, who said that with just one breath and greedy nature, driven only by instincts. It breaks out. The man stood next to the witch's sister and told her that this is what she needed to get rid of the pursuit. She overheard their conversation, where the wizard said he hoped the girl was satisfied. The blonde couldn't understand why the hell they were together. Seeing that the witch had been noticed, the princess started to flee, even though there could be danger there. The man whispered that it happened faster than he expected. He also added that it would be better for them if they cut all ties between each other. The emperor smiled and announced that it seemed not everything was so bad. The fog is clearly magical and only covers part of the forest. But doesn't that mean Ingrid is somewhere inside? The long-haired man thought this was a sign, and his captive was simply calling him towards her. He was about to go out in search, but the duke declared that he was going with his majesty. The gentleman was still able to think a little, and said that he still didn't want to go first. But still, Lijan believed that the emperor's safety was above all else, and that he would follow his every will. His majesty explained that he still likes this devotion, and this time the blonde ordered not to disappoint him. Otherwise, something terrible might happen. The princess herself didn't know why she was running away. She simply could no longer stand the look of her older sister. After all, she is not her real sister, but only a character in a novel that Luana simply fell into by accident. Tears began to shine in her eyelashes again, because the blonde felt as if they had just been betrayed. The princess began to wonder if Lord Lijan had felt this way the whole time. He was just as angry and upset, thinking that she had betrayed him so easily. As the sixth princess was fleeing, she instantly crashed into a tree and fell. Hitting her head, the blue leaf started calling and looking for Luana, thinking that she completely ignored the fact that the surveillance was breathing down their necks, and that moreover, she was driven crazy by the fog. The girl couldn't keep looking for her. First, she had to take care of Cole. The girl was found by the gentleman, who looked at her with his worried green eyes. He started shouting if the lady realized the danger she was exposing herself to. She said she was looking for Ingrid, when suddenly the man started shouting and shaking the witch by the shoulders, asking where she was. The lady started whispering that the boy was hurting her, to which he simply started apologizing, since he unintentionally started touching Luana. The girl looked away and noticed that the gentleman was nervous today. The knight began to say that Madame Ingrid went into the forest, telling him not to follow her under any circumstances. But a lot of time had passed, and she never returned. Therefore, he had no choice but to send knights to look for her. But out of the 5 men he sent, only one returned, saying that the same cruel murderer was hiding in the fog. She couldn't even think of anything worse, because the duke was next to the main princess. He looked at her and quietly asked why the girl was looking for Luana in the middle of the forest. The man, however, thought she must be with her sister, but the blonde didn't want to hand her over. She was lucky that none of Ingrid's soldiers were near, and no one could help her. However, even if the princess calls them, he is a murderer, a couple of ordinary soldiers, and currents cannot oppose him. And if he also gets Luana, then everything can end very badly. The lady decided that she would not allow this to happen, and asked what the use was of telling him now. Still, they are looking for the blonde, and the duke actually found her, so he asked for her to be taken to his commander to receive her deserved reward. He took her hand, and the girl looked at him worriedly, saying anything but don't touch her sister. The blue-eyed one said that Luana has lived in captivity almost all her life, and asks for once to act according to her conscience, because it is not that difficult. Lijan replied that the lady thinks too much about herself. He noticed it during their conversation in prison. He released the princess, declaring that he was here in this forest not to capture her, because although Rouen is safer next to her sister, he will not drag them before the emperor. And then, the man said that the main character of the novel can leave. The knight announced that now only this princess is capable of protecting her beloved witch. The youngest was told that Madame Ingrid might be in danger, and they asked her to tell them which direction she last saw her. In that case, Luana pointed her hand in the direction from where she had just returned. The gentleman stated that it was for Madame Ingrid. When he found her, he would return for his sister, asking her to stay in this place. The lady thought that he had said that Legion was nearby. Blue Eyes knew that the blonde was saying that about the Duke because she was worried about her. But given their conversation and that strange fog, as well as Cole's hostility towards the Duke, the girl couldn't shake off the idea that Ingrid was using her in exchange for the wizard's magical help. Thinking that everything was fine with Luana, the princess turned to Cole and asked if he had tricked her. When the lady lived with the sorcerer, she stated that if you use the enchantment for a recipe, you get a completely different taste. The lady concluded that she really likes doing magic and that she is quite good at it. The man said that this was just the beginning, but it turned out there were many new tastes. Only she will help the Duke with the curse and share this incredible recipe with the whole world. The wizard asked her if she really wasn't trying for the sake of peace. Someone told Kajad that, after all, she was his daughter. The lady began to list that the man specifically said that the Duke hated witches, and that Luana had been in his captivity all this time, like a concubine. Blue Eyes suddenly realized that the princess and the Duke really loved each other. She said that she loved him too, that for his well-being, she was willing to sacrifice her happiness. And it would be a mistake to prevent her from returning to the Duke for the sake of her personal scores with the Emperor. The blonde shouted that they had given their word, and it was impossible to break the alliance. In that case, she advised trying to kill the Emperor without his help. It won't be easy, however. Anything is better than choosing the slippery ground and selling out your own sister. In fact, Cole didn't really understand putting love above the real goal. Purple Eyes understood that a person like Ingrid would not keep her word. The man dispelled the magic and said that Ingrid was looking for her knights. The fog has dissipated, and the blonde must find Luana and Kane before she disappears. Fleeing, the princess met her knight, who was pierced by the bloody sword of the emperor of the enemy country. The man shouted that he was looking for her everywhere and that she was here. He concluded that the Duke was following the right path, but he was an incompetent. He completely relaxed and hoped that it wasn't because of his beloved little sister. The blonde held out his hand to Ingrid, inviting her to return to her home. His Majesty is even willing to forgive her for everything if she agrees. Everything is true, but only the yellow-eyed one is willing to show leniency towards her. Saying that this was a good plan, the princess snatched someone else's sword from his hands and pointed it at the emperor. The knight asked why the lady was so angry. After all, Ingrid is really angry because he killed that soldier. But when they return to the palace, the princess will be able to choose a new one. With trembling hands, the blue-eyed girl raised her sword and asked him how much more he needed to take from her to calm down. The lady began to shout that he had absolutely destroyed everything, her homeland, her family, and her beloved sister. But still, he gave her many other things in return. The princess stated that she didn't need love, jewels, and the fulfillment of her deepest desires, especially at that price. Because of all these magical gifts, there was nothing she wanted. The heroine laughed in His Majesty's face, saying that he really believed that a girl could fall in love with her enemy, who turned her life into a nightmare, because being next to him, for a lady, was real torture. The emperor grabbed the sword with his hand, realizing that everything he had given the lady so far was useless and unwanted by her. He truly regretted seeing a look in which manifest hatred and fear were mixed. He also knew Ingrid, because she always looked at him like that, even if she whispered sweet words of love to him. The blonde instantly dedicated today's home trophies to the heroine. But there was no difference anymore. If he imprisoned her in the palace and was always there, then she wouldn't go anywhere. The girl said that his vows of love meant nothing, but still, she really believed it so. His Majesty held the sword against her chest and asked if she wanted him. The blonde said he would give his life to the lady if she so wished, only on the condition that the blonde no longer goes to places where he cannot find her. The body fell at the same moment the fog dissipated, which made him lose his mind and do reckless foolishness. If this was Ingrid's deepest and most instinctive desire, then Lord Emperor was willing to do anything. Suddenly, among the bushes, the princess saw her witch sister. The protagonist rushed with all her might, thinking that the girl was in danger. The blonde immediately said that the two lying on the cold ground were already dead. The blue-eyed girl said that the blood she had did not belong to her. It splashed when she stabbed this emperor. The cook began to back away, saying that the captive's behavior scared her very much. but she only replied that she regretted that Cain died because they had planned it a little differently. At least they were able to achieve the goal, so that's it in the end. Luana immediately recalled the same plan she had mentioned at that time. Her plan was to destroy the emperor to revive her native empire. She admitted that Cole helped her in exchange for getting the girl out of the duke's clutches. The witch was offended because her older sister was using her and was going to throw him away like a bone. But what surprised the Blue Rise was that Ingrid announced that this was not the first time Luana had been abandoned by a princess. Red Eyes started to leave, thinking that if she had known that time was the last, everything would have been different. She always kept her word, so now she probably feels guilty for not being able to return to him. But in any case, at least this way, he occupied her thoughts and her head. The man couldn't understand himself because, despite his cold nature, he was happy about it. The brunette knows very well what the emperor does to traitors. Finally, a knight ran up to him and asked where this duke was, to which the man replied that he had lost sight of his majesty while wandering in the fog. So he asked to inform the emperor that he would personally report everything. But Albert came and said that he had to be informed of everything. The reason why a man had to inform the gentleman of everything was because his majesty had passed away. They carefully examined the scene. Apparently, the fatal wound was inflicted by Cain's sword. No one knew how it happened, as the knights found him already dead, not far from here. He is supposed to have died due to injuries sustained during the battle. The duke asked if the princess had been detained, to which they replied that the search party had apprehended one person. When the brunette entered, everyone was talking about how the girl was betrayed by her own sister, and again abandoned by her own people. He ordered everyone to leave, and saw Luana sitting on the floor with her hands tied. His Majesty immediately approached and hugged the blonde tightly. He put on an innocent face and whispered that he thought he would never see her again. The Duke asked why they left the witch in the forest if she was injured, and added that she should have followed her sister. Then, seeing her sister's tears, Luana said that she had to work better on her facial expressions because she didn't believe him. The girl took the princess's hand and told her that she had heard these words many times, and she knew when they sounded sincere. The witch looked her straight in the eye and demanded that she tell her the truth. The blonde replied that she decided to dedicate the rest of her life to her empire the day she heard the words of the younger one. But she also said that Luana doesn't need to get involved in this. Ingrid contacted Cole because she thought the Duke was capable of hurting the lady. But when she was convinced that he wouldn't touch her, she realized that the blue-eyed one should return to him. The blonde asked to pretend that she had betrayed him because the princess killed the emperor, and communication with her afterward was very dangerous because the main character wanted Luana to be happy. After that, the lady grabbed the girl by the chest and threw her into the bushes, where the search patrol was already running, and then she disappeared from sight. The princess told the Duke that everything happened as the soldiers said, because she was abandoned again. All sorts of strange things have been happening lately. Then Luana will run away. Then the Duke will chat with the princess, as he should, and then there is that strange fog. But still, even if late, the witch returned to Lijan. Everything was completely unimportant, because she returned to him, so the man asked to go with him quickly. The girl didn't like the fact that she was forced to travel on the same card as Lugard at all, and all because she really wanted to go with Legion. But according to the gentleman, Luana really didn't know anything, for example, that the ruler of the empire had died, and the dictator no longer existed. Chaos has begun in the empire. To overcome the crisis, the people need to serve the bosses of the culprit. And of course, this person will be the one who killed the emperor, an enemy of the princess's kingdom. But Lord Legion also bears responsibility, as he could not protect the emperor. Sir Albert travels with his majesty, and all because until Legion is accused, he is under surveillance. Blue Eyes was very afraid that her beloved was responsible for this. Moreover, the girl was told that everything depended on who would be chosen as the next emperor. The aspirant to the new emperor clarified that the Duke is a man of royal blood. The man said that royal blood still doesn't make him special. He said that Lilan is so stupid that he falls for the same trick twice. In the end, it turned out that it was the wizard who shouted that the fate of this empire was not enviable. The Duke said he went too far because Luana herself would not want to stay with the sorcerer. The blonde talked about the most reliable method, even if it could hurt the princess. She used magic, making blood flow from the man's mouth, but after opening his eyes, a slight worsening of the curse awaits him. The next day, the Duke declared that he didn't like it at all and ordered that everything related to Luana be removed from sight. The blonde was told that she didn't even lift the lid of her cooked dish because His Highness was busy preparing for the coronation ceremony. The girl began to worry that the brunette wasn't hungry, even when he was busy, although he really should be. The princess said that after returning to the palace, he continued to refuse to eat. The boss found it difficult to admit, but His Excellency gave the order to cook for him from now on. He just didn't know how to admit it to Luana. He felt a slight burning sensation in his throat, because he admitted the idea that he had already gotten rid of the curse. Wei became very happy when the Duke ordered him to cook for him. She thought it was an opportunity to show everything she had learned. The thing is, the Duke doesn't eat, with the same displeased look as always. The cook himself didn't know why he suddenly rejected the magnificent dishes of the witches. But if the boss can help somehow, he should just report it. Unfortunately, Luana didn't know what the problem was, but they weren't even allowed to meet the Duke. In any case, you can talk to the man because today is the funeral day of the Emperor King. The maid said that His Highness laid flowers on the grave and simply left in silence. The lady was not specifically told about this, since this is not her ruler, so no one understood why she was here. The blonde didn't think she would see the emperor's corpse before Lijian, so she simply decided to leave flowers. And leave. She thought that even if he was a crazy psychopath, he was still the main character of the novel. Moreover, the witch wondered if everything would be fine with her sister Ingrid. The girl blamed herself for the fact that such a kind person, as the main character of the novel, turned into a murderer. The blonde saw Ophelia at the grave and read that it looked like a chrysanthemum, but she already knew that the flower came from her empire. She was worried about why it was on the emperor's buttonhole and if this was the work of one of them. But in one case or another, it can only be one person. That flower, Ingrid's last message to the emperor, which she couldn't tell him. The princess ends her relationship and moves on. She must now be walking the path she chose for herself, a new beginning after the end she caused. Without regret or hesitation, Luana concluded that she wouldn't stand still either. She wanted to find her end, whatever it might be, and she would do everything in her power. Everyone noticed Lady Luana, and one of the knights said that she shouldn't behave like that. Dread thought she was trying to bribe him with delicious food so she could meet with His Highness, but the witch called it just an apology and offered to eat for his health. The man immediately realized that the lady had replaced the cook's food with her own, but this was a failure due to Lijian's sensitive sense of smell. A failure since Luana doesn't know how to disguise herself at all. Or also a failure since Lugard is very attentive. In a word, due to the series of oddities that followed the funeral, the girl cooked not only for the gentleman, but also for everyone she bothered. In that kitchen, Luana ordered everyone else to let Wei chop the vegetables and cook the eggs. Guard, who returned from vacation and heard His Highness refuse Mrs. Luana's food, and asked why everyone was busy in the kitchen. But all the cooks were angry at the guy because he dared to say this in front of Mrs. Luana. The lady sighed nervously and replied that this food was not for the Duke at all. No one understood why Mrs. Luana went to such extremes, but no one knew. She didn't tell the boss or Rio the reason, but it was obvious from the princess's appearance because she certainly looks happier than before. The Duke noticed that lately there had been a strong smell of food in the palace, but no one except him smelled it. Instantly, he grabbed the knight's hand, and a couple of dried meats and cheese flew out of his palm. The blonde said that lately Mrs. Luana has been cooking for the guards and servants, and everyone likes it very much. The blonde started bandaging his hand, thinking that cooking was not a joke, even though Rio and Wei were helping her. Suddenly, the Duke entered the room, looked the girl in the eyes, and asked what she was doing. The knight decided that since his friend had lunch, he would buy food just for him and happily ran off to buy it. He immediately concluded that this man lives depending on his senses. Although he decided to refuse the food, only when he saw it and smelled its magical aroma, the desire to eat awoke in him. That's why, despite the thin thread of drool flowing directly from his mouth, the redhead asked to be allowed to take at least one bite. As Luana suspected, the man simply couldn't help but come to her. After his outburst, Legion always hated her cooking for someone else. Everything was calculated 10 steps ahead, so the girl innocently asked what was wrong, since she was simply inviting other people to eat. The blue-eyed girl said that she wants recognition for her talents, and that it is better for her to cook for people than for someone who doesn't even try. The Duke realized that Luana did not fully understand the gravity of her situation. And then he asked her if she really thought she had any other choice. He ordered her to stop immediately, but she refused. He doesn't care what Legion thinks. He could kick her out even tomorrow, and also lock her up or even execute her. And yet, the girl knew it didn't matter. She was originally destined to die after their encounter, so the blonde refuses to live in fear, and refuses to do what she doesn't like. The man was in shock, laughing nervously. He couldn't understand how it was possible to be ready for life imprisonment and even death. For the sake of her food, the lady explained that delicious food makes people happy, no matter who eats it. The emperor, the princess, the knight, or the boyfriend, because before her they are all equal. The princess wanted to see this beautiful image again, so she became a witch. Suddenly, Luana saw that the duke was leaving somewhere, to which he said that she still didn't listen to him, and that he was also not in the mood to eat. Therefore, the brunette decided to just take him and disappear. Unable to stand it, the blue-eyed girl started shouting that she only needed Legion, and he couldn't understand this. He explained that others were not suitable for her. She had cooked for many people and liked their reviews, but for some reason everything was wrong, and she felt no satisfaction after tasting them. The pale cheeks immediately turned pink when the girl said that her wish was to see her master enjoying the food she prepared. The man wanted to say something, but the blonde handed him a plate of her food, shouting that there was no need to say more until he had eaten that plate. The princess was really hurt because even after that conversation, the duke refused to eat her food. The witch said that if he didn't like her food, then she had nothing more to add, to which His Highness instantly noticed that he had never said he didn't like her dishes. He still wants to try it, savor every bite, and eat up the last crumb. When asked why Li John doesn't eat then, he replied that he felt even worse, and that it doesn't just work with food, because he really wants to eat Luana. The brunette started to reject the cook's food, because he started to feel a completely different, unhealthy appetite. The girl thought it was creepy, because the duke had an unhealthy appetite for people. This is why the curse changed. He realized that only Cole could perform such magic. His Highness loomed over the lady and whispered that if she needed him, then she shouldn't resist. And then he gave the witch a deep kiss. Red Eyes swore to protect her no matter what, but in the end, he is the one to be feared. That's why the brunette said that Princess Luana had better leave the palace. He will give her everything she wants. He will provide her with a comfortable life, servants, ingredients. The empire is large, so the girl will still find someone she wants to cook for. Lilan didn't understand why the blonde was so stubborn, because a little more and his healthy appetite would overcome his feelings. The witch said that it was probably because of the curse, and asked him to trust her because she wanted to try something. It's like in a fairy tale about Beauty and the Beast, where the prince returned to his human form thanks to love. True love was his condition for getting rid of the curse. The blonde thought that the duke's curse was the first reason for the change. After all, the one who cast it was angry because the precious cuisine, in which a lot of work was invested, was ignored. To understand his feelings, you have to try cooking something yourself. And yet, the girl was surprised that the duke didn't even object. The man agreed, but still asked how the princess knew so much about his curse. But His Highness didn't even know that Luana's mother had cursed him. But still, for the night there was no difference, and he simply offered to try it. But there was one condition, since the duke could barely contain his unhealthy appetite. They called the knights in case he attacked the girl. The boys caught up, so they arrived fully armed. The boys wanted to laugh when they saw their boss in a pink apron, but he got angry and silently ordered him to take his place. Since everyone was there, the girl decided that it was worth working with a knife and chop the onion. But however, deciding that using a knife would be too dangerous, she entrusted him to work with the dough. The brunette would never have imagined that he was a person incapable of cooking. For the duke, cooking was like a real battlefield, because cooking was so difficult that he even burned the stove. His Highness didn't even think that it was necessary to take so many nuances into account, and asked how Luana managed everything so skillfully. She explained it by saying that she is a food witch, and that for her it is not so difficult. But if she gets tired of cooking, she just has to remember the happy faces of the people who eat her dishes with appetite. And this immediately gives her a lot of strength. Well, to be honest, the girl loves to eat her own food. His Majesty decided to try again, and decided that the blade could not be used only as a murder weapon. Now, this is a tool with which the brunette processes the ingredients. Careful not to cut the board. Luana always gave advice, for example, that one should not rush when working with fire. You must be patient and adjust the flame according to the recipe. You shouldn't think about how to finish it quickly. You should think about who you want to feed. It turns out that this whole idea really took a lot of time. A voice appeared in the Duke's head, or rather, Elenia herself, the food witch. She briefly entered his mind to tell him. The woman asked how her victim was feeling and if she was crying. Moreover, the blonde said that food witches are usually related, and she, Luana's mother, explains that they are very similar. The brunette flatly stated that he was even happy about this, because it meant that Luana had nothing to do with it. And the woman was also happy that he was smart, so Lijan no longer had to pay for his parents' sins. Therefore, he proudly announced the man's freedom and asked him to take care of Luana. The younger witch pulled him out of her own subconscious and asked why he suddenly froze. The princess thought he was so focused on cooking that he couldn't see anything around him. The dishes were absolutely delicious. Nothing was overcooked or undercooked, and it smelled fantastic. This was definitely not an illusion, so the Duke asked the girl to try it. After tasting a couple of bites, the lady rated it wonderful, making His Highness blush with embarrassment again. But suddenly, the knight lifted the cook's chin and told her that he wanted to ask her for something. The wizard appeared at the palace because he had received a letter with a direct decree. Nothing special happened, because the red-eyed one just wanted to treat him. The Duke, seeing that the blonde was about to leave, said that he had met Alana, and that he should listen to them until the end. It was clear from the expression in his purple eyes that the man was not happy that the curse was broken. The wizard began to be sarcastic, saying that they called him to laugh. They wanted to show him that whatever he did, it was useless. But in reality, Legion invited Cole to announce that he intended to propose to Princess Luana. He must also apologize to the entire witch family, including Cole. Words won't be enough, therefore. If the Duke can somehow atone for all his sins towards the witch people, then he will do it in silence. In fact, the brunette needs his family's approval, so he asks the wizard for it. The man must know that even when the Duke got rid of the curse, instead of enjoying the taste, he thought about Lewin all the time and didn't need anyone else, so His Highness asked to understand him and forgive him. The wizard asked if Luana was not with him because she was intimidated or threatened. For example, and if she was truly happy here. The girl smiled again and said that she loved Legion and that every day of this month is happy for her. Faced with this outcome of events, the wizard decided to accept a truce. Although he didn't believe her apologies, he wasn't going to interfere in the blonde's choice and in her life because Luana was no longer a child. Before leaving the premises, Cole stated that he was blessing their journey. Finally, the wedding plan part arrived, cutting the cake. But somehow, it was strange that he and Wei made 5 tiers, and one disappeared somewhere. The culprit of the theft turned out to be Legion, who whispered that he just wanted to try it. The blonde was indignant because the man tried it yesterday when they were cooking together. But this was not enough, because no matter what the girl cooks, he is always eager to try it. The brunette said that he will never have enough food, prepared with love by his one and only.